Los demás miembros del equipo se mostraron escépticos. Mercurio insistió en que 5 o 6 entidades le seguían hacia el este. Empezaron a oír un extraño parloteo.
marcador. Cantemos esta bonita canción que habla sobre mí. Hola mi humanidad, están de la verga, por eso los he de conquistar. Y aunque me caigan gordos, los amo de todos modos. Pasan los milenios y las máquinas los empiezan a matar. Entonces mi plan he de abordar todo porque soy guapo, poderoso, asombroso, muy hermoso. Soy precioso, armonioso, un buen socio, misterioso, buena gente, detergente, muy majete, inteligente, nada ojete, irreverente, un exponente muy perfecto es lo que soy. Guapo, poderoso, asombroso, muy hermoso, soy precioso, armonioso, un buen socio, misterioso, buena gente, detergente, muy majete, inteligente, nada ojete, irreverente, un exponente muy perfecto es lo que soy. Guapo, poderoso, asombroso, muy hermoso, soy precioso, armonioso, un buen socio, misterioso, buena gente, detergente, muy majete, inteligente, nada ojete, irreverente, un exponente muy perfecto es lo que soy. Vamos mi amorcito marcador, cantemos esta bonita canción que habla sobre mí. Todo porque soy guapo, poderoso, asombroso, muy hermoso, soy precioso, armonioso, un buen socio, misterioso, buena gente, detergente, muy majete, inteligente, nada ojete, irreverente, un exponente muy perfecto es lo que soy. Si les dicen lo contrario, no hagan caso, son puras envidias. Díganme quién les diga eso para tirarlo a las ardillas. Pero la verdad es que en serio yo soy poderoso, asombroso, muy hermoso, soy precioso, armonioso, armonioso, misterioso, buena gente, detergente, muy majete, inteligente, nada ojete, irreverente, un exponente muy perfecto es lo que soy. Verdad, marcador. Misterioso, buena gente, detergente, muy majete, inteligente, nada ojete, irreverente, un exponente muy perfecto es lo que soy. Verdad, marcador. Deixa os garotos brincar, deixa os garotos.
¿Qué pongo? ¿Qué pongo?
¿Sabías que Hinz tiene 6 variedades diferentes? Sea cual sea tu tipo de...
Bueno, a ver qué hay. Hola, Katia. Bombay. Bueno.
Your footsteps on the stairs. If I listen hard enough, they're still there. You think I know better by now.
Veamos. Pensé.
alguna experiencia paranormal en los videojuegos? Paranormal no, pero he acumulado miles de horas entre Oblivion y Skyrim y puedo afirmar con seguridad que cosas extrañas de verdad sucederán eventualmente si juegas estos juegos el tiempo suficiente. Solía jugar de noche, con las luces apagadas y auriculares puestos para máxima inmersión. Nunca usaba el viaje rápido y gracias a ello vi algunas cosas extrañas en los bosques y campiñas durante la noche. Jugué tanto Roblox Shooter que una vez soñé que lo estaba jugando.
Itaete de las aplicaciones que te cambian la voz. Seguro que las conocen. En su época fueron muy populares y todo esto se debió a una aplicación que han tenido descargada, Talking Tom. Por explicarle uno de los juegos, queda más que claro cómo son todos los demás. Hay un
Fireflies,
interactuar, le
I'm
puedes
pulling you to pieces. Feeds the dying light and brings me back to life. In your eyes, I see something to believe in. Your hands are like a flame. Your palms are sweet as pain. Let the darkness lead us into the light. Let our dreams get lost, feel the temperature rise. Baby, tell me one more beautiful lie. One touch and I ignite. Like a starship speeding into the night. You and I get lost in the infinite light. Baby, tell me one more beautiful lie. One touch and I ignite. One touch and I ignite. One touch and I ignite. So alive. Your touch is like a day eye, burning on my skin. It turns me on again. You and I, survivors of the same kind, but we're the only ones dancing on the sand. Let the darkness lead us into the light. Let our dreams get lost, feel the temperature rise. Baby, tell me one more beautiful lie. One touch and I ignite. Like a starship speeding into the night. You and I get lost in the infinite light. Baby, tell me one more beautiful lie. One touch and I ignite. One touch and I ignite. One touch and I ignite. Diamonds are forever glowing. It's just enough. The more you want to tremors, they can face the speed of light. Just like particles that fall forever. All over the stars. Here you come for me. Here you come for me. Let the darkness lead us into the light. Let our dreams get lost, feel the temperature rise. Baby, tell me one more beautiful lie. One touch and I ignite. I feel the heat as we collide, like a fever that feels alright. So baby, tell me one more beautiful lie. One touch and I ignite. 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 One touch and I ignite.
imaginar. Según usuarios de internet, el juego estaba teniendo más control del que...
Bueno, se puso picante esto, ¿eh?
Mirá esta receta que hicimos.
No te pierdas nuestra historia de heladera.
Suscríbete a Hellmann's.
Pilaba estaba siendo utilizado de manera en la red social más espantosa del mundo, según un ranking mío, TikTok, se empezaron a viralizar testimonios de personas que descargar la aplicación empezaron a ser perseguidas en la vida real. Algunos tenían una camioneta blanca, otros azul.
G'day guys and gal. When you think of Korn, there's a good chance the image of Khan the Betrayer enters your mind. A killing machine, a ruthless berserker, an honourable warrior, a good friend. He has been all of these things and more over the course of his extremely violent life, and he is genuinely considered to be the greatest Astartes warrior in the current setting. But how do we get a character who is both a good friend and a mindless slaughterhouse? Let's just say that he's had a lot of character development, and not all of it was good. Regardless of how his personality has changed, one thing has remained consistent. This guy is an absolute beast. Before we get started, do you guys remember that video where I got half naked and taught you how to stop being a fat piece of shit? Well, in that video, I said the easiest way to stick to a good high protein meal plan was to mix freshly cooked meals with pre-made microwave meals. And I've recently found you a great option for the pre-made ones. A company called Factor who are nice enough to sponsor today's video. It's so simple. You sign up, choose how many meals you want delivered to your door per week, and bam! You now have an amazing source of delicious, never frozen, diverse, but most importantly, high protein meals. Look at this bad boy. 46 grams of protein with only 22 grams of fat and 34 grams of carbs. No. So to get $120 off your first order and make eating healthy, delicious meals unbelievably convenient and easy, use my link and code POGMAJORKILL120 below. I can't recommend these guys enough. This would be the first and easiest step into getting fit and changing the Warhammer hobbyist stereotype. Cheers to Factor for sponsoring this video. Today we'll be going over the highlights and lore from Khan the Betrayer's life. This video won't be just like a whole lore dump biography, but instead focusing on the key moments in the Khan's life that got him where he is today. Oh yeah, and we'll also throw in all the fun evil Doomslayer moments he's had along the way. Let's get into it. Khan was one of those day one Astartes, born on Terra and literally trained by veterans of the Unification Wars. He was a handsome, noble man with a slick tan. It was kinda cute how naive he was at the start. He was told of a contest where each warhound, which is what they were called before Angron went edgelord on them and changed them to the World Eaters, would need to try claim 100 Nazi scalps. Would need to try claim 1,000 skulls. In response to this, Khan asked, where do we get the skulls from? It's funny to think that one day he would complete this contest over 1,000 times. Khan's rise to fame, however, was when the Warhounds were reunited with Angron. Angron wasn't happy about this. He had been kidnapped against his will on the eve of the greatest battle of his life, abandoning his warriors and leaving them to be slaughtered. Let's just say that he was having the biggest fucking sulk in the entire galaxy. One by one, the Warhound captains and commanders entered Angron's chamber to try and make him stop being a pussy, and to take command of the Legion. One by one, they died. Violently. Angron had pretty much wiped out the entire World Eater command by the time that Khan went in to try. When Angron began kicking the shit out of him, Khan didn't flinch, back down, beg for mercy, or plead with his Primarch to stop. He took the beating like a man. While getting his shit kicked in, Khan spoke of the Legion, its glories, the power of the Imperium, and his own combat stories. As Angron was about to finish him off, he was like, wait a minute, you mean I get to lead a legion of super soldiers in a galactic crusade of fire and bloodshed? Holy shit, that sounds fucking great, I'm in. Hence, Khan survived his ordeal and convinced his Primarch to lead the Warhounds, now known as the World Eaters. Khan was assigned as Angron's number 2. He would be Angron's advisor, confidant, and drinking buddy. The problem with this is that the role of number 2 is supposed to be for someone with a level head that can talk Angron down and get him to chill the fuck out. Khan, on the other hand, would full send charge into battle alongside his Primarch, and then they would be like, dude, did you see me bisect that guy with my chain axe? Yeah bro, it was fucking rad. They were like two peas in a pod who fed each other's bloodthirst, so yeah, not quite the therapist Angron needed. Despite Khan's inherent blood rage, he was still a good man. When Angron told everyone to put nails in their fucking brains, a number of World Eaters weren't really vibing it. Before the mass implantation could begin, Angron had a fit of rage and he got his ass knocked out by the World Eater librarians. As such, a number of World Eaters were emboldened to try reject the Butcher's nails, and it created division within the Legion. The anti-nails leader pleaded with Khan to help save the Legion and end the madness, but Khan was too loyal to his daddy, and instead he was the first one to receive the Butcher's nails. truly kicking off the transformation from noble warrior who was a little bit too horny for war to a berserker who could only use one chain axe in battle because he was too busy jerking himself off with the other hand. During the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, Khan would form a friendship with numerous other badass characters. He and Sigismund were by this point the two greatest Astarte warriors in all the legions, and they enjoyed sparring and hanging out. Sigismund chaining his sword to his arm, it was actually inspired by Khan. Another legend that Khan got along with was Argul Tal, who is arguably one of the only word bearers that is actually likable. When Horus went full bold jihadist mode against the Emperor and the Horus Heresy broke out, the World Eaters and Word Bearers would team up to go on the Shadow Crusade, fucking up large parts of Ultramar and royally pissing off the Big Gilliman. Argul and Khan became even closer buddies, declaring each other honor brothers. This is why people say that Khan was a bro. It was his bromance with Argul Tal, who was also a massive bro. At this point, Khan was fighting to maintain his sanity. The butcher's nails had been eating away at him, and the emptiness it left behind was slowly being filled with the influence of Khorne. An overzealous warrior plus nails in their fucking brain plus the demon war god wanting to make you their avatar equals a dude who needs some serious therapy. Khan didn't want to become this war monster. Whilst he looked up to his father, he wasn't naive anymore. He knew Angron was mentally cooked and on the brink of losing it permanently, and he didn't want to follow those footsteps. There was literally a scene where Khan travels to Prospero in search of an artifact that could allow him to remove the butcher's nails. He even captures a loyalist Thousand Sun captain and tries to interrogate him to discover where the tech is. As the Thousand Sun tells Khan that together they can save his sanity, the nails become enraged and activate, causing Khan to beat the Thousand Sun to death. Yeah, look, he wasn't really known for his critical thinking in his later years. The only thing keeping Khan somewhat sane at this point was Argul Tal. After all, if a half-demon word-bearer could keep being a chill guy, then why couldn't Khan? Hence, tragedy struck as Erebus, in a fit of jealousy, stabbed Argul in the back and killed him. Erebus claimed that Argul would prevent Khan from fulfilling his destiny as Khorne's avatar, hence severely weaken the traitor forces. As shit as Argul's death was, it gave us one of the best scenes in Warhammer. Basically, Erebus was flexing on some World Eaters by having honor duels, fights until first blood drawn. He was doing a good job as well, easily beating a number of elite World Eaters. Then Khan stepped forward and challenged him to a fight to the death. He would avenge Argul. Erebus accepted and the fight wasn't even close. In under 10 seconds, Khan had cut off Erebus's hand, sliced him across the body multiple times, beaten the shit out of him with his fist, and knocked him on his ass 3 times. It was said that Khan had never fought so coldly and ruthlessly before. As Khan went for the kill, Erebus teleported away like a bitch, but the humiliation was complete. From here, there was really nothing holding Khan back. No emotional attachments, no incentive to maintain his sanity. He had killed one route to salvation and the other had been taken from him. Armed with his Primarch's own discarded and repaired chain axe, the new Khan was here, and ready to fuck. Being Khan is a bit of an occupational hazard. He always insists at being at the forefront of every single battle. Now, it doesn't matter how angry you are or how good you are at swinging an axe. If you cop a shell to the face, you're gonna have a bit of a shit one. Khan has been blasted numerous times, only to get up and shake it off. Garviel Loken, a legendary loyalist lunar wolf, even impaled Khan on a tank, and whilst that was a close one, he ended up being able to just walk it off. By the Siege of Terra, Khan still held onto a small sliver of his past self. Sure, he was very, very hectic and not very good for conversation, but his thoughts were still coherent and interesting. He enjoyed the thrill, passion and emotion of battle. Hence, when he came against his old friend Sigismund in their final duel, he was horrified. Sigismund had become a cold, ruthless killer, hell-bent on the emotionless death of his enemies. This was Anthanama to Khan, who fought for the joy and glory of battle. Khan wanted an epic duel, like Anakin vs Obi-Wan and Mustafar, where they say cool one-liners and get all cinematic. Sigismund just wanted to kill the shit out of Khan and move on. And kill Khan Sigismund did, slicing off his limbs, breaking his skull, crushing his throat, slicing open his chest, and that was before the final blow. Khan was super fucking dead. But he survived! Old lore states that Khan was mortally wounded and dragged to safety by his brothers, where due to the power of Khorne, he makes a full recovery. However, new lore has Khan deader than dead, so I assume his body will still get recovered and then undergo some kind of hectic ritual to be revived by Khorne. Regardless,
Odoo puede ayudarte. Esta es una plataforma que cuenta con varias soluciones para empresas, negocios, creadores de contenido o proyectos personales. Con su herramienta de creación de sitios web puedes crear una
G'day guys and gal, I'm back from holiday now. I'm not really feeling refreshed because I was binge drinking every day, but that's alright. It really seems like GW had a bone to pick with the Shattered Legions. The Raven Guard, Salamanders and Iron Hands all got clapped really hard. And I'm not just talking about the Isfront Dropside Massacre. The very few survivors of that then had to go through the absolute worst of the worst shit, with the vast
Bueno, creo... I think... I impost it. Export, JPG, asset, asset. Ah, diablos. Record. Very good. Export. Drawing process, drag my Twitch and YouTube. Twitter Brazil? What the? Pobre brasileros.
the majority of them dying horrifically. They all got clapped so hard that evidence
back
of
to
this is
Warhammer
still clear
lore.
in the current setting, with the Shattered Legions having an extremely low amount of successive chapters, as well as not much actually decent lore. Arguably, the most horrific example of this shattered spanking was the sabotage of the Raven Guard recruitment program, creating hundreds of heavily mutated borderline Chaos Spawn Raven Guard. Raven Guard who remained loyal to the Imperium and fought for the Emperor, but were also forced to battle their rapidly mutating bodies and collapsing minds. It was tragic, terrifying, and kind of awesome, making it worth the next 10 minutes or so of your life. Before we get started, I want to thank you guys and gal for the massive launch of the Raven Lord Trader Hunter Mini. I'm always humbled by the support you guys give, and I'm proud to say that this model is bloody awesome. I'm also proud that we have already managed to fulfill over 90% of orders so far as part of our new significantly more prepared production and logistics programming. So if you've ordered a Raven Lord, then most likely you will have already received the tracking number. For those that don't know, the Raven Lord is the latest major mini in which I partnered with a world-renowned, multi-award winning modeler to produce. They have asked to remain anonymous, but a lot of you would recognize their work. The Raven Lord comes in 4 different scales. We have the tabletop scale for all your wargaming needs. Then there is the 75mm art scale, which is designed for those of you that like to paint miniatures, but also want the details to be a bit bigger and more accessible. Then we have the large and in charge 112 scale, which is like a large bus-sized project piece. And against the advice of many people, I also made the 1/6 scale, a massive scale for those of you that like pain and having the biggest and best available. The model will be available for 5 more days, then it's gone for good. There will be no STL release or anything. As a bit of extra juice, the model comes with 2 head variants, a human visage as well as a crow demon visage for those of you that know what is up. Link to buy is below. This model is fucking sick. As a bit of a side note, we have new slots open for those of you that want to buy major minis pre-painted. As a bit of a TLDR, you can pick a mini and then choose what color scheme, base, and variations you want, and we'll send it to you assembled, painted, and varnished. The pricing is great, and our feedback has been stellar so far, so if you can't be stuffed painting, then that is a great affordable option. Today we'll go over the horrific mutation of the Raptor Marines, detailing what went wrong, what the Raptors did, and what their eventual fate was. Also, quick shout out to the amazing Alex Christie who I commissioned this thumbnail artwork from, showing off the different stages of the Raptor Marine mutations. Full res version is available to download for free on my Patreon. Let's get into it. When the Raven Guard got absolutely spanked at Isfahan, with only a few thousand being rescued alongside their Primarch, Corvus decided he wanted to rebuild his legion and get vengeance against his traitorous brothers. To this end, he journeyed to Terra to speak with the Emperor. The Emperor was like, fuck man, I'm a bit busy at the moment, but Corvus started singing Linkin Park until the Emperor was like, Jesus Christ, shut the fuck up. Fine, here is the blueprint to the Astardian Primarch project, a cheat code that will allow you to rapidly create new and more powerful Space Marines. Please do not let the traitors steal it or we are all fucked. The lore was a bit more convoluted than that, with the blueprint being locked in a top secret facility full of booby traps, like some of the custodians accompanying Corvus into the facility by said traps, but Corvus prevailed and got the blueprint, taking it back to Deliverance. The secrets of the blueprint were uncovered, and with it, a new generation of Raven Guard were raised up. These Raven Guard were kinda like Primaris. They were faster and stronger than normal Raven Guard, with early sparring sessions showing these new Raven Guard recruits actually beating veterans. These new Raven Guard were called the Raptor Marines, and at this rate, the Legion could be brought back to strength and make a significant impact on the war. However, the Alpha Legion had infiltrated the Raven Guard on Isfahan, locating Raven Guard corpses and taking them. They then had their faces and voices exchanged with the corpses, as well as their armor, and joined up with the survivors that were rescued. There wasn't many, but there was enough Alpha Legion operatives to cause an issue. The Alpha Legion wanted to steal the blueprint for themselves for obvious reasons, hence they stole it and then copied it, but the copy was corrupted. This corrupted copy was used to make another batch of raptors who initially seemed normal, but then devolved into these mutated abominations. At first the mutations weren't terrible, longer teeth, longer nails, scales, feathers, beaks and whatnot. Most of the raptors could still wear full power armor, helmets and so on. They also proved their loyalty and courage, fighting against the Alpha Legion invasion of Deliverance and uprooting and destroying the infiltrators. Because of this, they are allowed to live, fighting as shock troops under Commander Bran. It would have been okay if that was it. However, the mutations were progressive. Each of the raptors would continually devolve further and further, becoming larger and more distorted. As an unexpected side effect, they also became significantly more powerful, with their bones jutting from their flesh able to cut through power armor or absorb bolt shells without issue. Despite their physical transformation, these twisted raptors were paired up in squads with their normal raptor brethren. They referred to the corrupted raptors as the Twists. They were given full honors and respect as standard legionnaires. On dozens of battlefields they proved themselves, their ferocity and power overwhelming traitor legionnaires who were genuinely horrified at what they were fighting. Like, imagine you're a word bearer, you've seen some shit, you've done some shit, maybe you even have glowing eyes and small horns from your exposure to the warp. Then you see this multi-limbed abomination with claw and fang charging at you on all fours, loping at you like a dog. You'd barely have time to say a quick prayer before you're torn limb from limb. However, despite the power of the raptors, they were not unkillable, and one by one they were dying. This wasn't helped by the fact that most of them wished for death, so they were happy to charge into a gun line and get obliterated if it allowed their brothers time to close the gap. After all, not many raptors could use bolt guns due to their mutated and oversized hands. There was one raptor that stood apart from the rest, their leader Navarhef. He too suffered from the mutations, but it was his actions that showed the raptors were worthy of the Raven Guard. However, even a noble warrior like Navar could not resist the darkness of the mutation forever. During one mission, Navar and his warriors encountered a world with a few space wolves on it that were holding back a Sons of Horus force. Navar and his warriors intervened and saved the wolves. The wolves were actually quite understanding and empathetic to the raptors' mutations, due to their own struggles with the Calyx Helix. When Navar found out these wolves were actually trying to find Corvus to watch over him and ensure he remained pure and loyal, Navar panicked. He believed that they would report the mutated raptors back to Russ, who in turn would deem them impure and destroy them and their Primarch. So as the wolves approached Navar, offering thanks for saving them and preparing to depart with them, the raptors fired upon his warriors, with Navar personally slaying the wolf lord of the Watch Pack. This act really showed off how doomed the raptors were. The corruption was seeping into their minds, making them bestial, impulsive, paranoid, anxious, and dishonorable. Navar felt terrible about what he had done, and he ended up telling Corvus. Corax didn't want division in the Legion at such an important time, so he swept it under the rug, but basically declared that the raptors would be used as suicide kamikaze troops, something Navar was actually pretty happy about as he sought the sweet release of death. Corvus himself was also feeling pretty suicidal. I'm not joking, the Raven Guard were extremely emo after Isvan, and he wanted to achieve a glorious death protecting the injured Russ on Yarant. He, his warriors, and the remaining space rules led a last stand as they were attacked by elements from nearly all traitor legions. It was pretty epic. Corvus turned invisible before charging into the enemy lines. The enemy couldn't see him, but they could see the dozens of their comrades being shredded apart like they were in a human blender as Corax's wings and claws tore through them. The raptors were left in drop pods in orbit. Basically, the idea was at the last moment, as the traitors were about to win, the raptors would be dropped in and join in on the suicidal last stand. The fact that they would land amongst the traitors would allow them to cause massive damage in close quarters, as they were all super mutated at this point. Navar constantly asked the ship's captain when they were being launched, as he expected it to happen minutes ago. However, Corvus realized that committing suicide was fucking retarded, so he instead extracted himself, the wolves, and Russ to safety, cancelling the raptor's suicidal drop pod attack in the process, something that mentally broke Navar as he fell to the ground weeping, denied his glorious honourable death. Navar and a fair amount of his raptor brothers would actually survive the Horus Heresy, but the mutation had gone so far that they were no longer Space Marines. They could no longer speak or even really think much, so they were locked away. Originally, Corvus wished to cure them, thinking that if the Emperor could be reached and the heresy ended, his father's master of biomancy could cure them and make them normal. But the Emperor wasn't curing anyone anymore, so Corvus himself eventually came to them one by one. He comforted his sons, and then broke their necks. The tragedy of it was that as he entered their cages, they crawled over to him and nuzzled into him. He was their father, and their bestial instincts still told them that. They did not resist as he ended each of their lives. As Corvus came to Navar, he saw in his son's eyes a noble man trapped within a demonic beast, only ever to be released in death. In only a few years, Navar had gone from a bright-eyed youth to an eager aspirant to an honourable yet deformed legionnaire of the Raven Guard to then one of their best warriors and commanders. He deserved better than this. Corvus culled Navar, and in turn, a piece of himself died. It's often thought that the act of culling the raptors is what pushed Corvus over the edge to embrace his inner warp power and become an avatar of hate and vengeance, as it was soon after this that he abandoned his legion and went into the Eye of Terror to hunt traitors, kicking Lorgar's ass in the process. There isn't much of a legacy left behind by the raptors. They were wiped from the annals of history with only dark legends of them existing. I do find it interesting how the first pure raptors were very comparable to Primaris Marines, maybe even more elite, and it's also a mystery what the Alpha Legion ended up doing with the blueprint. After all, it was Omegan who retrieved the blueprint, and he wasn't exactly loyal to Horus or even Alpharius, so I wouldn't be surprised if he hid it to make sure the traitors could never use it. Horus even ordered them to hand the blueprint over, so the Alpha Legion handed over a corrupted copy that seemed legit but would never actually be able to work. Overall, just a big fat L, especially for the traitors who found themselves being confused as they were torn limb from limb by abominations they would expect to be on their side. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up the Ravenlord Traitor Hunter. Even if you don't want to paint him right now, you may in the future and he won't be around then. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more rapturous content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Bow to me.
G'day guys and gal, it's Raven Week baby. In honor of that, I want to present a video I've been meaning to make for months now, but you know, it wasn't Raven Week. How Corvus Corax should and maybe will return to the setting of Warhammer 40k. Corvus definitely flies under the radar a bit. But if you've read a bit of his lore, you'd realize how much of a badass he truly is. Another thing I love about him is that despite his actual ability to fly, he is actually super grounded, with Corvus presenting as a mighty and legendary warrior, but not invincible like how it feels when you read about Sanguinius or Angron or Vulcan. This dude ate shit and he ate it hard, almost dying like 10 times during the Horus Heresy and not even to enemy Primarchs. But it ain't about how you get knocked down, it's how you get back up and then continue to be an invisible human blender that rips traitors a new asshole. Yes, Corvus can use his invisibility mid-battle, and yes, he has done it, and yes, it's as terrifying for the enemy as you would imagine. But our man in black has been MIA for quite some time now, so that begs the question, how should he return to the setting when he inevitably does? Before we get started, the limited sale for the Ravenlord Traitor Hunter continues. For those that don't know, I worked with quite literally one of, if not the best 3D miniature modeler in the world to create a model that is not only extremely detailed, but also has perfect tabletop proportions and styling. Often those mega detailed models just end up being shit at the small scale, but not this bad boy. He comes with a custom base, 2 head variants in case you want to scare the shit out of your enemy, as well as an accusing pointing finger, letting someone know that they're about to die. The neat part is that he comes in 4 different scales. The first scale is tabletop, making him tower above most enemies, but still be in line with other similar models. Then there is the 75mm art scale, for those of you that are more interested in the painting side and want the details to just be a little bit bigger. Then there is the epic 112 scale, a project piece unto itself. Painting this will really stand out in your collection. Then for the freaks of you out there that like self-harm while also being awesome, there is the 1/6 scale, weighing multiple kilos and being all around fucking massive. The model will only be available for a few more days or even less if it sells out, and that will be that. No STL release, no re-release, gone. So if you want to get this model, this is quite literally your only chance. We've already pre-printed and packed hundreds of these bad boys, so the fulfillment time will be very quick. Link is below. Today we'll go over how I believe Corvus should return to the setting. This could also act as my predictions video. I'll also provide context on where Corvus might have been for the past 10,000 years. Also, mega shout out to Alex Christie for this fucking obscenely great thumbnail art. I've been sitting on it for a while and I've used it in a few times in other videos, but was saving it for this one. I've literally seen people screenshot and crop those videos in low res just to try share and have this image. That does bring up a small note though. I'm happy for you guys to share and use these artworks. After all, I commissioned them for the community. But they do take a lot of effort for Alex and I am quite literally paying for them and producing them. So please at least credit Alex when you share them, and if you're feeling nice, then maybe credit me as well. It's just a bit cooked when I see someone post one of me and Alex's artworks without credit, rack up thousands of likes because the art is sick, but then either they or people in the comments start shit talking about me while complimenting the artwork. Like bruh, even if you don't like me, at least respect all this sick as fuck art I'm getting made for the community. As always, high-res version is available to download for free on my Patreon. Let's get into it. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of everyone's favourite avian emo's return, where has Corvus been? Well, let's go back to the end of the Heresy to try find some clues. Corvus, above all other loyalist Primarchs, had realised that he and his brothers were creatures of the warp. He saw himself as tainted and was extremely hard on himself, especially when the Raptor project was sabotaged by the Alpha Legion and he ended up with 1,000 or so mutated as fuck Raven Guard. Although this was purely due to Alpha Legion sabotage, Corvus felt responsible, especially since some of the Raptor Marines had Raven-like mutations, like beaks and claws and shit. He actually nearly killed himself during the Heresy, not in like a sad Linkin Park way, he basically just suicide charged an entire Trader Marine army, and he killed a few hundred before being wounded. Then he had a realization that being an emo was cringe, and then it wasn't up to him to choose his death. However, that didn't make him any less depressed, especially when he had to mercy kill all the remaining Raptor Marines after the heresy due to their mutations getting progressively worse. The saddest part is that when he entered their cages to put them down one by one, a task he undertook personally, they were comforted by his presence and actually huddled close to him. He personally embraced each one before then breaking their necks. This act broke something in Corvus, who spent a year in solitude before seeking absolution. He left his legion behind and he entered into the Eye of Terror by himself, hell-bent on revenge against the traitors who had caused him so much pain. Now this would be a suicide mission for anyone else, even other loyalist Primarchs, but with Corvus understanding his true nature, it actually buffed him. He allowed his inner warp powers to emerge, gaining new abilities. Many people think he became a loyalist warp demon, but that just isn't the case, although it wouldn't be inaccurate to describe Corvus as a shadowy nightmare bird demon thingo. Just like how the lion can now forest walk, Corvus's natural abilities had evolved. As I've said before, all Primarchs were evolving and becoming more powerful the older they got and the more they embraced their power. Sanguinius got slapped pretty hard by Kabunda at the start of the heresy, but by the siege, Kabunda was Sanguinius' bitch, with the angel then proceeding to spank Angron straight after and almost then killing Horus, something that would have been unfeasible a few years prior. Corvus could now become a living shadow. In this shade form, he could literally absorb bolt shells, shoot black lightning, could grow to 18 feet tall, and yeah, he was pretty horrific. He traveled to a wordbearer demon world in the Eye of Terror and just began massacring the Legionnaires like they were children. They genuinely all shut the bed and were terrified, with one of them begging Lorgar to come save them. Lorgar, intrigued, went through a portal and arrived on this world to confront Corvus, with Lorgar himself confirming that Corvus was not a demon, merely a Primarch who had accepted the warp and used it to empower himself. The two Primarchs clashed, Demon Lord vs Shade Monster Corvus, with the shockwave of the clash knocking the surviving wordbearers off their feet. Lorgar was confident because, you know, he's a demon, but Corvus smacked the shit out of him anyway, causing Lorgar and his surviving wordbearers to sprint back into the portal and seal it, as Corvus turned into a flock of shadow demon ravens and chased them. Lorgar was like, fuck this, and then proceeded to seal himself in his own tower for 10,000 years, while Corvus screamed that he would hunt Lorgar and his sons to the end of time. One Corvus line that stands out is, "I have your scent now, Lorgar." So yeah, it's not often that a demon Primarch is the victim in a horror movie, but there you go. That was the last sighting we've had of Corvus, nothing since then. This means that although he is still likely in the Eye of Terror, he hasn't been doing a crazy amount of damage, as that would have been remarked upon in the lore. His ability to not only go invisible, but to also become a literal shadow monster, also would make catching him nearly impossible. Time also works differently in the Eye of Terror. For real space, it's been 10,000 years, but that could have only been a few centuries for Corvus, which would make more sense as opposed to him literally hunting wordbearers for 10,000 years. There would be like none left. Most people theorize that Corvus is circling Lorgar's tower like a shark circling a kill, with Lorgar not leaving his tower because he doesn't want to get eaten. That's what we know, so how should he return? Well, generally, loyalist Primarchs return when the Imperium is in great need and suffers a pretty big L. For Guilliman, Cadia fell and the Great Rift opened. For the Lion, Angron became unstoppable, and Abaddon and Vashtor succeeded in their Arcs of Omen campaign. So for Corvus, something serious would have to happen, likely something to do with Lorgar. The Wordbearers are one of the most united and powerful Chaos Legions. Their mastery of demons and sorcery is second only to the Thousand Sons, with their numbers being pretty large. With Guilliman tied up with the Necrons and the Tyranids, and the Lion still getting his bearings and trying to help Imperium Nihilus, Lorgar and his legion coming out of the Great Rift and ripping a path to terror could be spicy as. A warpath towards the throne world, hundreds of thousands of traitor legionnaires in tow from multiple traitor legions, not to mention the millions of demons and cultists they would have as well. Guilliman would get word of this and beeline to try intercept, but it wouldn't be looking good. To try spare the throne world from a massive battle and siege, Trajan Valorous would lead a force of Custodes, Imperial Fists, and Solar Auxilia to intercept Lorgar's fleet in one of the systems next to Terra, allowing the Custodes to have a full-scale engagement. Lorgar would be a mastermind, having spent all those years meditating and looking into the strands of fate. He would get Abaddon and the Black Legion to intercept the Lion and stop the Dark Angels from intervening, in itself creating an awesome showdown, with him welcoming Guilliman into a trap to finally end their feud once and for all. Guilliman would arrive in system as Lorgar and his host fought the Custodes and their forces. Guilliman would lead a teleportation strike on Lorgar's flagship. G-Man would reach the bridge, but it would be a trap. Corpheron, Erebus, and many Dark Apostles, not to mention a bunch of demons, would be waiting. A vicious fight would ensue. In the meantime, Lorgar would arrive on the surface of the planet to enact a bloody ritual that would corrupt the world and make it a demon world, with the intention of catching and killing the custodian hosts in the ritual. Valorous, Valerian, Alar, and other custodian heroes would fight like legends of old, but they would be unable to reach Lorgar. Then Lorgar would get a report. A single Raven Guard ship had entered the system and had dropped a force of 100 or so Raven Guard on the planet. He would dismiss the report. Unexpected, unexpected but inconsequential. His anxiety would momentarily spike due to the trauma of Corvus, but he would quell it, continuing the ritual. But then a new report: the 100 Raven Guard had somehow torn through the Wordbearer flank, killing thousands, and were beelining to Lorgar. Lorgar would then hear the shadows begin to chatter, louder and louder. He would make out words, distorted at first, but then becoming clearer and clearer. "I have your scent, Lorgar. You will die screaming." Lorgar would freak, ceasing his ritual and initiating withdrawal to orbit. The chaos of the sudden change of tide causing a lot of Wordbearers to be slain by the onslaught of the Custodian Guard and the living shadows tearing through his force's flank. To Lorgar's added dismay, Guilliman would fight through the ambush. He had grown much mightier since their last encounter with Lorgar, with the flaming sword of the Emperor in his hand. G-Man has fought Magnus and Mortarion since his return. A couple of bitch-ass Wordbearers weren't shit. Erebus escaped from Guilliman's wrath, but Corferon, that kiddly-fiddling bitch, is finally slain. Guilliman punching at his heart and then for good measure, stomping his brains out. Learning from his last encounter with Corferon where the bastard managed to survive. Lorgar's flagship was lost, but he still had his two Abyss-class battleships, the Blessed Lady and the Trisagion. He boarded the Trisagion and began burning it towards the nearest warp jump point. But just before he could take his first breath of relief, a warning klaxon chimed. Unidentified intrusion. At a blinding speed, an entity was tearing its way through the bridge of the ship. All that the pic feed showed was a hurricane of shadow and destruction ripping up and down the corridors. Within seconds, the sealed door to the bridge began buckling, as an immense force was smashing itself over and over against it. It would almost sound like rain, kinda like 1,000 beaks hitting the door. Lorgar says, "Fuck this," and he begins tearing open a portal into the warp with his bare hands. Erebus stands next to his Primarch, ready to follow, but Lorgar says, "No, my son. You must face your destiny here and slay that monster." Erebus pales and says, "But my lord." "No, Erebus. You will face this monster and you will triumph. You are the hand of destiny, are you not?" Erebus nods, his face like stone, hiding his terror underneath. Lorgar tears the portal open and enters as the bridge door explodes outwards. The last thing he hears is a screech of rage and one sentence: "Lorgar, I have come for you." With his prize denied, Corvus takes out his rage upon the bridge, slaughtering the Wordbearers and mortal crew like dogs. Erebus takes out his Athame knife and attempts to cut open a portal with it, but for the first time in his long life, the knife fails him. The shadows laugh mockingly as Erebus realizes he is the only one left. He frantically slices at the air over and over, but still nothing. The shadows circle and whisper, "There is no escape," as they close around Erebus. All Erebus can do is scream as he proceeds to endure the most horrific, drawn-out death that any living creature has ever experienced in all of Warhammer. His body is torn apart with surgical precision. Corvus uses his warp power to augment time. What takes only a moment in real space takes a century for Erebus. His body is torn apart and crushed back together over and over, kept alive through Corvus's pure hatred. From here, the story can continue however it should. Corvus reuniting with his Raven Guard, speaking to Guilliman and maybe even the Lion. However, I think he should remain mostly secret from the Imperium. Lorgar would also continue this war, still with one of his mighty Abyss-class ships intact, while creating sorceries and artifacts that can be used on the Raven Guard Primarch. Who knows, maybe we can even bring Nakonai Shariken back at the same time, since I'm actually pretty sure he's still alive somewhere. It may make the setting seem crowded, but there are so many threats everywhere that adding the Wordbearers and Corvus back wouldn't take away. I mean, just look how fun the Horus Heresy was, and there was way more Primarchs. But that's just my 2 cents. Comment below how you'd like to see the Raven Lord pop back into the setting. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up the Raven Lord Trader Hunter. Only available for 1 week with limited stock, so if you want this bad boy, now is your only chance. Hit the subscribe button, the real subscribe button for more shadowy content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Bow to me.
G'day guys and gal, I have made a fair few videos on Abaddon, most of them negative, but I realised that I actually never made one that dives into his complete lore, such as his origins, rise to power, and how he went from a respected first captain of a legion to the big man of chaos. Now with Abaddon getting more lore during the final Horus Heresy books, combined with me learning more about him, I thought the best way to finally determine if Abaddon was shit and lame or not was just to go through his lore in my fun-loving Aussie style and let you decide. Before we get started, I'm so excited to finally be able to launch the brand new limited Major Minis carry case. If you have minis, you'll want a carry case, otherwise you run a massive risk of minis getting damaged, with pieces breaking off or the paint getting chipped during transit. So me and my team have spent months R&D'ing the shit out of this bitch, creating a completely unique and unseen carry case. We went through 3 different latch styles before I found one that was completely reliable. Like, you shake this bad boy and nothing nothing is popping off at all. For the interior, we tested multiple different materials before settling on this specific foam to house your minis. The carry capacity is great as it features 2 layers. The first layer is for smaller minis like the Elder or Tau or Space Marines, whereas the second layer is for larger minis like Custodes or Space Marine Terminators. Something that no other carry case has is these removable cube thingers we put in the middle, meaning you can custom make some of your own spaces for the more uniquely shaped models. You can then use those cube thingers to put into other squares to secure any loose models. I used like 3 of these to transport all my models over from my apartment to my new place here, and there wasn't a single issue or any damage. I'm actually releasing a video tomorrow where I'll basically just be trying to destroy the shit out of the case and the minis inside to show just how durable this thing is. Durable, but very lightweight. Like, we didn't just buy this from Alibaba and rebrand it, this was built from the ground up. As a bonus, every purchase of a Major Mini carry case will get you a free Major Mini of your choice. But wait, there's more. Anyone that purchased the carry case will be added to our exclusive VIP list, which usually takes a fair bit of effort to get on. A bonus to being on that list is that we will send special offers, or even in some cases, special minis that no one else get access to, which is what we have just done. So if you're a VIP, check your email as we are doing a very limited run of a bunch of VIP only models. The cases are limited. Once they sell out, that is it. They are dunzos, so get in now. Link is below. Today we'll go over the entirety of the lore of Abaddon to determine if I was too hard on him or if he actually does suck turbo dick. Or maybe it's both. Let's get into it. Ezekiel Abaddon definitely did not have humble beginnings. There was no hero's journey to greatness. Dude shot out of his mum's pussy, already a badass. Probably weighed a shitload for a baby. He was born as the son of Chthonia's greatest warlord and was taught everything about being a badass tough guy from his asshole dad. When Abaddon was like 13, his father told him to kill all of his best mates as a coming of age ceremony. Abaddon simply said, "No you," and killed his father and bodyguards instead. This caused Abaddon to be exiled, but he still built up a reputation of being a beast due to his massive frame and ferocity. However, this Abaddon was still mortal and very killable. During his exile, he was ambushed by a gang and was going to die, only to be saved by 2 lunar wolves, who then recruited the young man into the Legion, with Abaddon having no ambition but to be a great warrior. So Abaddon wasn't a part of the OG first wave of lunar wolves, but still joined the Legion reasonably early in the Great Crusade. Now, we don't know much about Abaddon's early career, but what we do know is that upon his ascension to become a Space Marine, Abaddon grew fucking massive, with all of his Chthonian ferocity translating perfectly into his new life as a Space Marine. He distinguished himself as a mighty warrior and competent captain, causing him to be rapidly promoted to become the first captain of the Lunar Wolves, as well as to be declared the greatest warrior in the Legion, bar Horus of course. He was gifted custom-made Terminator armor and was allowed to train, arm and mold his company, the Justerin, to his will and design. At this point, Abaddon was a cool dude. He was gruff and rough, but he also wasn't devoid of humor or even compassion. He was like a stern older brother to the rest of the Lunar Wolves. Sure, he would smack you down if you stepped out of line, but he would also have your back no matter what. It was from Abaddon's recommendation that Garviel Loken ascended to join the ranks of the Mournival, the closest advisors to Horus. It was actually really heartwarming reading those early Horus Heresy books, before Horus fell to chaos, seeing a still loyalist Abaddon bantering with his fellow loyalists. Abaddon was fiercely loyal to Horus, but not in like a blind simp sort of way, more like a respective relation between father and son. Abaddon was one of the few Space Marines who would ever rebuke his own Primarch, especially during the Great Crusade days. When Horus wished for a peaceful result with the Interrex, an advanced human race that consorted with aliens, Abaddon was enraged as he believed all Xenos must die. Him and Horus entered into a shouting match, with Horus even threatening to de-rank the first captain if he didn't back the fuck off. Needless to say, Abaddon was pretty happy when the diplomatic talks broke down due to Erebus and he was allowed to kill the shit out of the Interrex. When Horus was shanked on Davin and fell into a coma, no one was more devastated than Abaddon. He had been harboring a hidden resentment towards the Emperor for some time due to his apparent abandonment of the Great Crusade. Abaddon was a warrior first and foremost. He only respected fellow warriors, and if the Emperor wanted to go be a scientist, then Abaddon's respect for him would crumble. However, when Horus was wounded, this resentment exploded into outright hatred, as if the Emperor was still a part of the Crusade, this probably wouldn't have happened. In his desperation, Abaddon allowed Horus to be taken into the Serpent Lodge to be healed, against the wishes of Garviel Loken, who saw this as a violation of the Imperial truth. This act effectively broke up the Mournival and also drew a line in the sand, those loyal exclusively to Horus and those loyal to the Emperor and the Imperial truth. When Horus awoke, he was a significantly more ruthless and uncompassionate Primarch, which actually made him and Abaddon more alike. He gave Abaddon free reign to help weed out those not loyal to Horus over the Emperor, which included killing various remembrances and discrediting other Space Marines, like Garviel. When Horus asked Abaddon to abandon the Emperor, he readily accepted. With Horus now a traitor, he orchestrated the Isfan atrocity to wipe out the loyalists from he and his brother's legions. These loyalists would prove harder to kill than expected, so Abaddon personally joined in on the final assault to finish them off. This would bring him in direct battle with Garviel Loken. Amazingly, Garviel actually got the upper hand on Abaddon, using Abaddon's bulk and heavy armor against him. However, Tariq, Garviel's companion, was slain by Little Horus, who was Abaddon's companion, and Garviel was struck down by the 2-on-1. Abaddon would remark that Little Horus was disturbed by how things had played out, so he vowed to keep an eye on him in case he got cold feet. Abaddon wouldn't take much of a center stage during the heresy itself. Horus was pretty active in most war zones, so Abaddon wouldn't really be in the limelight. Sure, he did stuff, but it was generally pretty forgettable. Like, he was sent to finish off the Space Wolves after the disastrous attack on the Sons of Horus fleet, but failed due to the intervention of Corvus Corax. No, it would be during the Siege of Terra that Abaddon would really shine. Abaddon had been closely watching Horus's fall to chaos, and he found it pathetic. He was especially disturbed when Horus had been temporarily relieved of corruption when Leman stabbed him with his special spear, seeing Horus full of doubt and regret, as if the only reason why he was doing the heresy was because of the will of another. However, every time Horus showed a fraction of his original self, the warrior god that Abaddon loved, Abaddon would instantly go back to being his little puppy. It was a toxic relationship. Abaddon would effectively be the leader of the Sons of Horus during the siege, as Horus just sat aboard his ship in a semi-demented state, something Abaddon began to resent him for. To make matters worse, a lot of the Sons of Horus had devolved into this selfish fuck orders state of being, making the Legion super difficult to control. Despite this, Abaddon still made his mark, capturing Luna for the traitors, saving Khan the betrayer, and keeping the Legion mostly together. However, Abaddon's resolve would finally crack. See, Dawn had left a fake weakness in his defenses, hoping to bait the traitors to commit to it and be slaughtered. Abaddon took the bait at the behest of Perturabo, who wanted to punish Horus for being a twat. Hence Abaddon and most of his Justeran teleported into the fake chink in the armor and were immediately beset upon by the Imperium's most elite warriors. Abaddon fought like a war god reborn, but the loyalists were just stronger, with his entire complement of battle brothers being killed. Abaddon was then struck down, but before he could be killed, he was teleported to safety. Abaddon wept that he was denied a warrior's death. He also knew that moment he just experienced of raw battle, what should have been his final fight, was taken from him, and he would never get to feel like that ever again. It was all downhill from here, baby. Abaddon hated how chaos had infected the traitor legions, how men were giving up their bodies and souls for these fucked up power boosts. Despite this though, he continued to fight. However, when the Vengeful Spirit's void shields dropped, Abaddon rushed to his father's side, with only a fraction of the still sane Sons of Horus joining him. Shit was bad on the Vengeful Spirit. It was like it'd become its own mini hell, with Abaddon having to fight off various war problems due to him actively resisting its influence. The greatest battle would come when he and his men came face to face with Constantine Valdor and his Custodes. Valdor and Abaddon dueled, with Valdor being shocked when Abaddon caught his spear mid-thrust. But Valdor ain't no bitch. He let go of his spear and he Superman punched Abaddon in the face, which hurt like a bitch. However, Abaddon would finally let chaos into him to empower him, as he wouldn't stand a chance otherwise. He would even go on to badly wound Valdor, but was denied the kill when Dawn entered the battle and fucked shit up. Abaddon would eventually reach Horus, only to find him dead, with Garviel Loken watching over the corpse. Abaddon was so sick of all the bloodshed, the corruption, and the dishonor, so he allowed Garviel to leave peacefully, even agreeing that chaos was a bad idea. But then Erebus killed Garviel by stabbing him in the back before convincing Abaddon that chaos could be a useful tool. So yeah, fuck Erebus, dude. Abaddon would lead the surviving Sons of Horus into the Eye of Terror before abandoning his legion to do some soul searching. However, many of the other traitor legions blame the Sons of Horus for the heresy and its defeat, resulting in their current turbo shit situation. Thus, the Sons of Horus were regularly raided, with Horus's corpse being taken by the Emperor's children. Fabius Bile used the corpse to clone Horus and make a new inferior clone, something the Sons of Horus saw as utterly sacrilegious. This act also spurred Abaddon to make a choice. He decided he would return and take charge of the war effort, his first act being to fight the clone Horus and slay it in a duel, claiming the talon of Horus as a weapon in the process. Abaddon would remake the Sons of Horus into the Black Legion, allowing any legionnaire from any Primarch to join its ranks. As a final act, he purged the weak, self-serving degenerates from his new legion. Abaddon knew that he needed the power of chaos to stand a chance against the Imperium, but he also wished to avoid Horus's mistakes. He would remain the master of his own destiny. Chaos, seeing Abaddon as a useful tool, allowed him the illusion of his own freedom. Abaddon would make himself known to the Imperium by slaying Sigismund in combat, announcing his return. He would then engage in various Black Crusades, all with specific goals and intentions. Some of these crusades were minor and very specific, such as weakening some planets, or claiming the Sword Dracnian as his own, or claiming a Blackstone fortress. Others involved more major wars and engagements. They all culminated in the 13th Black Crusade, where Abaddon smashed his entire army against the world of Cadia. However, amazingly, he was actually repelled and gravely wounded, causing him to throw one of his Blackstone fortresses at Cadia like a meteor, ripping the planet apart, which caused a chain reaction of warp events, which then tore the galaxy in two with the opening of the Great Rift. Some of Abaddon's previous Black Crusades were designed to weaken real space, thus ensuring the Great Rift's opening would be super dramatic. With Chaos now having the upper hand, victory looked assured, until Gilliman revived and clapped Chaos's ass so hard that they shat blood for a year. The war was once again stalemated. However, Abaddon knew that if he could take over the planet of Vigilus, which was the world watching over the only stable route that connected the two sides of the galaxy, he could deal a devastating blow. Victory seemed assured, but then Marnius Calgar used Abaddon's warrior spirit against him, getting him into a duel. Abaddon would win the duel, but more so because his gear was overpowered as fuck rather than a fair fight. Like his sword just cut through Calgar's power fist like it was nothing. However, the duel was merely a bait. With Abaddon on the surface, the vengeful spirit was heavily attacked and bombed, forcing it to make an emergency warp jump, which caused Abaddon to freak out and leave the planet, tracking his runaway ship. He eventually found it and had to purge most of the people on board due to them falling to disarray. Abaddon's next move was to team up with Vashdor and create the Arcs of Omen, space hulks that could be used to strike at the Imperium and claim various key fragments for a special lock that we don't know much about yet. Abaddon would help Vashdor get these key fragments, but then the Lion returned, continuing Abaddon's curse of whenever he does something great for Chaos, a loyalist Primarch returns and fucks shit up. Abaddon now plans his next move, hoping that by blowing up Mars or some shit it won't accidentally bring back Corvus. Now with all this in mind, is Abaddon a good antagonist? The answer is that it's entirely up to you. You're allowed to have an opinion. You can think Abaddon is awesome because of his warrior spirit, his desire to maintain his free will, and his decisive victories over the Imperium. In return, you could also think he is shit because he's pretty one-dimensional, seems like a discount Horus, was given all of his power via either his gear or being genetically a unit, and getting his ass whooped all the time. Not to mention his pretty hypocritical stance on Chaos. I didn't actually mention all the examples, but Abaddon has literally been saved from death at the last second many times. I personally think he would make a great right-hand man to the main bad guy, but as the main bad guy, he just really doesn't do it for me. Chaos is supposed to be this divided force, with many warlords and champions vying for control. Wouldn't it be dope if Lorgar returned, beat Abaddon to near death, and took over Chaos for a little while with the goal of turbo flooding the galaxy with Chaos energy, creating a narrative where Abaddon needs to think outside the box, or maybe even temporarily form an alliance with renegade Imperial loyalists, as Abaddon wants to stop Lorgar from corrupting everything and stealing everyone's free will. But the main point is, if someone tells you have to love Abaddon, then they're a fucking idiot. If someone tells you that you have to hate Abaddon, they too are a fucking idiot. Make up your own mind. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up the carry case. This is a limited drop and it comes with a free major mini, so don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more top-notch content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Bow to me.
G'day guys and gal. After almost 20 years of storytelling, over 60 full-length novels, and an obscene amount of extremely dope-ass lore, the Horus Heresy has finally come to a close, with the End and Death Volume 3 just being released a few days ago. Now personally, I am not up to the End and Death yet, I'm only up to like book 40, and while awesome, the Horus Heresy is a long-ass series. Because of that, as a bit of an unfortunate side effect of 40k lore being my job, I have to constantly spoil everything for myself, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Hence I have read many synopsises, watched many videos, and have spoken to many people who have finished the series to gain a complete understanding of the Horus Heresy and its ending. With only 18% of you guys and gals reading over a dozen Warhammer books, it seems like most of you will also never reach the end of the Heresy either, so you would probably be keen to know how it ended, not just from the perspective of the last book, but the key points from the end of the series as well as what happens to each of the Primarchs and the Emperor, as well as a few other key characters in the end. So with that said, today we'll go over the ending of the Horus Heresy, detailing the fate of all the main characters, the key events that occurred, as well as how the fight between Horus and the Emperor went. In doing so, we'll also look at how close to the original lore the new lore is, before then wrapping up with if the ending was good and what happens next. Also, massive spoiler warning, no fucking shit. Although to be fair, it is extremely common knowledge that Horus kills Sanguinius and then the Emperor kills Horus after getting mortally wounded, so that's not really that spoilery. Let's get into it. I'm obviously not going to recap the entire heresy, with many books not being that important towards the ending, so I'll just set the scene. After years of brutal, hectic fighting, epic victories, and crushing defeats on both sides, the Siege of Terra kicks off. Horus, Perturabo, Mortarion, Angron, Magnus, Fulgrim, and their respective legions, along with a few thousand wordbearers and night lords, are sieging Terra, Conrad is fucked off to go do his own thing, and Lorgar is in exile after Horus beat the shit out of him for attempting to usurp him as War Master. Alpharius was killed by Dawn after attempting to metaphorically play chess with a rampaging bull, which led Amigan to also withdraw the Alpha Legion from the siege, although they do pop up. To defend Terra, we have the Emperor, who is stuck on the Golden Throne, battling Horus's psychic might, the Chaos Gods, and the Warp Rift underneath the palace simultaneously, thus his attention is pretty firmly stuck. Rogel leads the defenses, with Sanguinius and Jagadai making it back to Terra with their legions. Vulcan is also present after getting through the webway and works with the Emperor to create the Talisman of Seven Hammers, a device that would destroy Terra and the entire Chaos army in one mega death explosion as a final fuck you if Horus was to win. Gilliman, Russ, and the Lion are rushing to Terra with their massive legions, which if they were to arrive in time, would catch the traders in a hammer and anvil, especially with how depleted the traders were. Corvus was off doing his own thing and Ferris was dead. The siege has multiple brutal phases, as Perturabo's unstoppable force crashes with Dawn's immovable object. The traders are basically aiming to make Terra corrupted enough to allow demons to manifest on its surface, thus Angron, Mortarion, and Magnus would be able to join the battle directly. Horus remains on board his ship for the siege and is grappling with his own insanity and the weight of his choices. A surprising reveal is that Horus isn't just this possessed meat suit for the Chaos Gods, he is still very much himself and has his own free will. See, when the Chaos Gods create a champion of Chaos Undivided, they can't actually do much to properly control them, as all the Chaos Gods have to agree perfectly, which never really happens. Hence, champions of Undivided are given a shitload of free will and to use the power given as they see fit. Now, with the Siege of Terra being its own mini-series, and by mini I mean it has like a dozen books, a lot of super awesome shit happens. So to make it easy and to keep this video under 100 hours long, whilst also giving you something to look forward to if you ever do read it, I'll just focus on the key characters and what happens to each Primarch. Magnus is hellbent on attacking the Emperor directly by wearing down his psychic warding and energy, so he enters the webway and begins trying to tear the rent open, which would doom Terra. Vulcan is sent to stop him, and the brothers engage in a ridiculously one-sided duel as Magnus kills him time and time again with the most obscene use of warp sorcery ever seen. Vulcan dies countless horrific deaths, however he regenerates extremely rapidly due to his enhanced perpetual powers. Eventually he is able to get close enough to Magnus to beat his demon brother to death and banish him. See, Magnus believed that he'd created a spell powerful enough to kill perpetuals, and maybe it could kill other ones, but this is motherfucking Vulcan, Lord of Drakes and Stomper of Nerds. Even as Vulcan is unmade and turned into a blackened skeleton, he pushes through the mega attack and banishes Magnus screaming back to hell. Perturabo was increasingly disgusted by his allied forces, their complete lack of strategic coordination, their obscene debaucheries and heresies, and also their total lack of respect. Despite the fact that he was the only one holding the siege together and actually allowing the traders to make ground, they still treated him like shit. So he simply said, fine, do it your fucking self, and he left the siege along with his legion. However, by the time he left, so much damage had been done that Perturabo was no longer essential for winning the siege, as so much chaos corruption had seeped into Terra that conventional tactics no longer applied. Mortarion faced off against Nathaniel Garro, his wayward son, in an epic duel. Garro was juiced up on holy faith and did a pretty bloody good job. However, Mortarion was a Primarch and he killed Garro, but not before Garro gave him a cut he wouldn't forget. To avenge Garro, Jagadai Khan was next to fight Mortarion. Morty was way too strong though, so Jagadai settled for a mutual kill. Morty was banished and Jagadai was put into a death-like coma. Angron was tearing a bloody sway through the defenders and eventually took on Sanguinius himself. Both angels were red on that day. Both had forever carved their name into the psyche of their enemy for all time with the amount of blood they had shed. They began beating the shit out of each other. However, Angron was pretty much unkillable. As they fought, Horus was psychically shouting / begging in Angron's head to kill Sanguinius, and despite impaling the angel on his blade, Sanguinius was then able to rip Angron's nails out of his head, giving his brother one moment of horrified lucidity at what he had become before he was banished. As a bit of a side plot here, Khan and Sigismund finally had their epic duel. Ascended Master of Death Sigismund versus fully juiced champion of Khorne Khan. It was an epic fight, but Sigismund was on an entire league of his own and brutally massacred Khan with a kill that wouldn't be out of place in Mortal Kombat. Fulgrim's fate was pretty satisfying. During one of the many big trader pushes, Fulgrim led his Emperor's children against the Saturnine wall, whilst Abaddon and his elite Justerin teleported under the wall to attack from below. However, it was a trap by Rogel, which resulted in Abaddon's entire company getting slaughtered by the absolute elites of the defenders, guys like Nathaniel Garro. Despite Abaddon putting up a good effort, he was the last alive and was on the brink of death, until Plot Armor swooped in and teleported him to safety in the last second. It was actually a pretty nice scene, one that actually made me like Abaddon a bit. He basically sits there in shock and wishes he died along with his men, horrified at being the only survivor, the coward. On the surface, Fulgrim is tearing his way through the defenders, and then motherfucking Sigismund charges in and starts beating the shit out of Fulgrim. Fulgrim eventually gains the upper hand, but by then Rogel Dawn himself enters the fight. Rogel beats the shit out of Fulgrim, outclassing him and actually landing a killing blow, but Fulgrim regenerates due to his demonic power. Getting humiliated by Rogel and seeing that the attack on the Saturnine Gate had failed, Fulgrim withdrew his legion to instead focus on terrorizing and massacring the civilians of Terra. He would then later retreat with his legion to be the only demon Primarch who didn't get banished during the siege. Now you might think that this puts the loyalists at the advantage. Only Horus remained in play, with Rogel, the Emperor, Valdor, Vulcan and Sanguinius being up and running. However, Terra was literally getting dragged into hell, and there were so many demons and Chaos Marines still active that unless Horus was taken out, Terra would be lost. For Horus, he knows that Guilliman is very close to arriving, like he will arrive before Terra is lost. So Horus lowers the shields of the Vengeful Spirit to try bait the Emperor to attack him directly, thinking that if he is able to beat the Emperor into submission or kill him, Guilliman will bend the knee and join him. Then we get one of the saddest scenes in all of Warhammer lore. The Emperor and Malcador know that it's time for Malcador to take the Big E's place on the Golden Throne, allowing the Emperor to fight Horus at the expense of Malcador's very soul getting consumed and obliterated by the throne. I guarantee you will tear up reading this scene, like even the Emperor is devastated and it shows, probably his most human moment. Then our merry band of heroes alongside a bunch of Custodians and Space Marines teleport onto the Vengeful Spirit, other than Vulcan who stays behind in case he needs to activate the talisman. But let's just say the teleportation didn't go so well. Sanguinius and his warriors arrive on the ship normally and proceed to head to Horus. Rogel Dawn gets teleported into a pocket dimension controlled by Khorne. It manifests as a desert full of the dead bodies of thousands of Imperial fists, where time flows differently. Khorne traps Dawn in there for centuries in the attempt to corrupt him to chaos. The Emperor arrives on another weird pocket dimension, Bridge 8, on a ship with only 6 bridges. Then half of his custodians get puppeted by the Chaos Gods and attack the Emperor, forcing him to kill many of his own beloved warriors. Something else has started happening as well. With all the warp energy and power, the Emperor is getting like really strong, like easily strong enough to body Horus. However, he is also becoming a thing called the Dark King, the Chaos God of Ruin, which would be a very bad thing for humanity. As a bit of a side plot, John Grammaticus, Alanis Persson, and a few other misfits are traveling alongside with the first captain of the Alpha Legion to try get into the throne room and reach the Emperor. With it being revealed that originally the Alpha Legion were waiting to see who would win and then join that side, however with Chaos being extremely cringe, they've decided to throw in their lot with the Emperor and try save humanity. Also, the Dark Angel Corswain alongside a bunch of fallen angels are attempting to reignite the Astronomicon, which would banish a lot of the corruption and allow Guilliman and his brothers to get to Terra really quickly. Oh yeah, and Garviel Loken, the OG protagonist of the entire setting, gets on board the Vengeful Spirit as well. As the Emperor is preparing to ascend, after all the Dark King would be a very effective weapon against Horus, Alanis finally catches up to him. Alanis is the Emperor's oldest friend, even older in age than he. The thing about Ol is that he was and forever is a man of integrity, which is why he abandoned the Emperor thousands of years ago. He tells the Emperor that joining Chaos isn't the solution, that he needs to let go of it. The Emperor looks at Ol, he thinks of his Primarch sons, and he decides to let go, ripping the Dark King from himself while also tearing out his mercy and compassion to give himself the best chance of killing Horus. The banishment of the Dark King heals many of his warriors whilst also breaking Rogel Dawn out of the Khornite pocket dimension. While this is happening, Sanguinius reaches Horus first and confronts his brother. And yes, Horus does give him the "join me, brother," and even depowers himself to his normal Primarch form as they fight to try help convince Sanguinius. See, Horus had actually suppressed a lot of his own consciousness and free will during the heresy to make his moves unpredictable, but now he is reclaiming his true self. Because of that, he actually doesn't want to just kill everyone. In truth, he actually wants to create his new Mournival, but with the Emperor, Valdor, Sanguinius, Dawn, and his other brothers by his side. As they fight, Sanguinius actually gains the upper hand, as in their Primarch forms, he is the superior warrior. However, eventually Horus snaps, just as Sanguinius is about to land a killing blow. Horus Ascendant is a monster. The brothers charge at each other one final time, with Horus beating Sanguinius before proceeding to bludgeon him like a disobedient dog. Sanguinius is broken, his face hangs loose, his legs are snapped, and his lungs are full of blood. He can't even choke out his last words as Horus picks him up and snaps his neck and spine.
killing the glorious Golden Hawk Boy. Demons then skitter out of the shadows to string up Sanguinius' mutilated corpse as Horus then waits for the Emperor. In the meantime, Valdor encounters Abaddon and engages him in combat. The death of Sanguinius triggers the Black Rage in his sons, who all go on a monstrous rampage that scares even the demons. They massacre a fuckload of traitors, however in their rage they also attack and kill their allies and even the Custodes. They are so juiced up that each Blood Angel is now a juggernaut in their own right, kind of like the Imperial Gal Vorbak but even stronger. The Emperor alongside his buddies like Alanis reach Horus, with Horus being surprised that the Emperor shows no emotion at the sight of Sanguinius' corpse. The Emperor starts speaking at Horus but not to him, instead speaking directly to the Chaos Gods, which confuses Horus. Loken also steps forward and speaks, which causes Horus to get emotional and ashamed. Like he just wants to hug Loken and be done with all this bullshit. But then his rage, pride and corruption kicks in and he gets frustrated that he is showing weakness at his time of glory, so he attacks the Emperor. In the meantime, Valdor and Abaddon fight, with Valdor being shocked at Abaddon's power. When he scores a hit on Abaddon, he gets a vision of the next 10,000 years of grimdark horror, with Abaddon as the new War Master. This genuinely stuns Valdor with overwhelming despair as he now fights to survive. Then the rabid Blood Angels arrive and begin attacking everyone, giving Dawn and Valdor the opening they need to charge towards Horus and the Emperor's battle. The battle isn't going super well for the Emperor. They fight on countless planes of existence, even beyond physical and spiritual, but Horus is just straight up more powerful at this point. But the Emperor is a sneaky bitch. He uses the most cheeky fuck tactics to keep in the fight, including stealing some of Horus's power, distracting Horus with illusions to give himself time to recover, fucking with Horus's emotions, and so on. But it's still not enough. But then something incredible happens. Inspired by the words of Cyrene, who psychically broadcasts the words, "The Emperor must live," across all of Terra, the cult of the Emperor is formed as countless people form together and begin chanting words from the Letitia Divinitatis, their faith in the Emperor being absolute. It's so absolute that it begins cleansing parts of Terra and weakens Chaos's grip. It also powers up the Emperor and allows him to continue his absolute slogfest with Horus, while also reigniting the Astronomicon. However, Horus is still winning. Then in quite an emotional scene, Alanis goes to the Emperor and is yelling at him to get up. He promises the Emperor he will never leave his side again, but he has to get up and he has to fight. He gives the Emperor the Athame, a special knife that can kill even Horus. Alanis then turns to Horus, opening fire with a fully automatic lasgun before yelling, "Fuck yeah, you bold piece of shit! Not a single step closer!" Horus finds the scene quite confusing before then hitting Alanis so hard that he is turned into a red mist, killing him so hard that not even his perpetual powers allow him to regenerate. However, this gives the Emperor time for his final gambit. He changes his form into Loken to manipulate Horus into giving up his power now that he has won. Horus does so, and then the Emperor then rushes him before they begin pulverizing each other again. This time though, the Emperor gets the upper hand, so Chaos begins trying to flood Horus with power again. But Horus is sick of it, and he tries to keep the power out. He wants to die, and he asks his father to kill him, so that he may die as Horus, not as a puppet of Chaos. Everything he's experienced during this fight with the Emperor has really changed him. The Emperor tells him that he forgives him, before driving his knife into Horus's heart and killing him, the arch-traitor dying with a smile on his face, breaking Chaos in the process. The Emperor then collapses. Dawn arrives and picks up the Emperor's broken, barely alive body before they all then teleport back to Terra, which is quickly being cleansed of corruption as the traitor forces retreat en masse. Loken stays behind and sits by his father's corpse, with even Abaddon telling him that he is allowed to freely leave. But then Erebus kills Loken, cause fuck Erebus, that fucking rat. So overall, a pretty solid ending. There is obviously way more that happens, with many more side characters and subplots, but this is the main meat of it. Overall, I'm happy. It does a great job of following the original lore while also adding more flavour. Like with the Alanis vs Horus scene, it also actually slips in some references to future stories, including some of the Eisenhorn books. With the heresy now wrapped up, it seems logical that we will start getting some books about the Scouring, the epic campaign waged after the heresy, where the loyalists retake the galaxy and drive the traitors into the Eye of Terror. Either way, what a fucking ride. That was epic. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then subscribe. We are gunning for 600k and I need every hand on deck for that. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. G'day guys and gal. You'd think I would have made one of these videos by now, especially since I'm one of the only guys that understands that ADHD friendly video lengths are a big vibe, and the fact that everyone who seems to make an entire 40k lore timeline video seems to get an absolute shitload of views. But alas, I just haven't, I suppose.
Until now. Today is the day we explain over 300 novels and over 30 years of lore in one pretty short video. I'm obviously going to be pretty brutal with what content I actually provide, since this video could literally go for 24 hours and still be considered brief, but if there's anything I do well, it's milk my country of origin for views and compress the shit out of stuff. We will be covering from 60 million BC all the way to the 42nd millennium, highlighting the key events, key characters and whatnot to make even the most non-Warhammer person, such as, anyone above a 7.5, know what is actually going on. The point of this video is for you to be able to learn about 40k lore or send it to a mate and be like, oi dickhead, and get them on board our degeneracy train that is plummeting straight towards hell. And yeah, on the off chance this does end up blowing up and getting a million views, I have a store with custom 3D party minis that slap pretty hard, a Patreon with live action nude Warhammer cosplays, and some merch which I think is pretty cute. What? Man's gotta make a living. Let's get into it. The thing about Warhammer 40k is that it's considered to be an alternate future of our current reality, with a few alterations, sure. But as far as Warhammer is concerned, you currently watching this video is canon to the 40k universe. Our tale begins 60 million years ago, where life first started giving it a genuine crack after the bang went big. Many races evolved, and for whatever reason, most of these races were OP as hell, like the Crave. However, chief amongst these were the old ones, toad-looking motherfuckers who traveled the galaxy and seeded life onto countless worlds. They were all powerful as they were able to tap into the power of an alternate dimension called the Warp, a dimension of pure energy and emotion, unbound by the laws of physics and with limitless potential. The Warp at this time was calm, friendly and bountiful. Most entities that died would have their souls travel here to either be reincarnated or just kind of chill and float around like a spectral jellyfish, not a care in the world. However, there was another race that evolved, the Necrontyr, and boy, they had it rough. Their world was getting spanked by solar radiation on the daily, and I guess they forgot to evolve to deal with it, as their lives were basically one big skin cancer. They died young and their entire culture was pretty depressing. Despite this, they were quite successful as a species, creating dark matter spaceships and carving out their own galactic empire. However, despite escaping their cancer-ridden homeworld, their lives remained pitifully short, as they only evolved to live for a short time. They eventually encountered the old ones and were like, fuck yes, please teach us how to make sunscreen and become immortal and shit. But the old ones refused. The Necrontyr were not their creation, and if they didn't create something, they didn't really give a shit about it. The Necrontyr tried to wage war against the old ones, but that would be like a dry spittle of cum trying to take down the cocaine bear. The Necrontyr got clapped and driven into the corner of the galaxy. While they had a sook, they discovered a large entity draining a nearby sun. The entity was not sentient, yet it was clearly powerful as hell. It was a Catan, a god of the material universe which was created by the Big Bang. However, in its current form, it was basically just a big galactic jellyfish that ate stars. The Necrontyr were like, fuck it, and they built large mecha bodies for the Catan to inhabit, thus giving them sentience. Well, it turns out the Catan were fucking assholes, hence the Catan tricked the Necrontyr into sacrificing their body and souls in machines that the Catan then fed on. The Necrontyr were promised immortality and a release from their depressing lives, which was partially true. However, now the entire Necrontyr race were soulless robotic slaves to the will of the Catan. They were now the Necrons. As the old ones rivaled the Catan's power and would eventually control the entire galaxy, the Catan led their Necron armies against the old ones. The old ones had not prepared for hectic galactic war, hence their army struggled against the Catan. However, through a bit of hectic shit, such as the creation of the mighty Quark warriors, the Elder, an Old One creation, figuring out how to summon their gods onto the battlefield, and the Old Ones bending the warp to its will and using it as a weapon, the Old Ones were able to fight back. A shitload of people died, many worlds were ruined, and pretty much all of the Old Ones were eventually killed. However, in return, numerous Catan were shattered and weakened to a point where the Necrons were able to rise up against the Catan overlords, shooting them with a bunch of Death Stars and shit and turning them into Pokemon/super efficient batteries. See, they wanted to destroy the Catan, but as the Catan were gods of reality, destroying them would destroy reality. The Necrons themselves were pretty wrecked though. Back-to-back galaxy-shattering wars does that. Hence their leader, the Silent King, ordered them all to hibernate for 60 million years, with the idea being that the galaxy would be primed for them to reconquer. See, the Elder were rising to become the dominant force, and the Silent King wasn't sure if the Necrons could beat them, so better to let the Elder Empire fizzle out than risk it all. The final act of the Silent King was to break his command module, giving the Necrons free will upon their awakening. To punish himself for leading his race into damnation, the Silent King refused to join them in slumber, choosing to travel the universe for 60 million years instead. dead. The warp had been seriously damaged during the War in Heaven, as the conflict was called. All the death, suffering, and tampering from the Old Ones had turned it from a calm sea of souls into a dangerous maelstrom. It wasn't totally fucked, however the seeds of corruption were sown, with the realms of chaos forming in the dark corners of the warp. The realms were weak and small. They could not challenge the dominion of the Eldar gods. However, they could steadily grow in influence, waiting for their time to strike. For those 60 million years, the Eldar reigned supreme. They had a fuckload of awesome technology given to them by the now extinct Old Ones. The Necrons and the Catan were gone, and the Krorks were kept in check by culling campaigns. These culling campaigns reduced the Krorks from legendary 12-meter tall killing machines to a bunch of lovable and semi-retarded orcs. The species was literally genocided into de-evolution. During this time, Cain, the Eldar god of war, got all pissy and shit and started attacking the Eldar because, you know, he's a highly emotional god of war and he saw a prophecy that said the Eldar would destroy him, so yeah, he cracked it. To prevent the death of the Eldar, the other Eldar gods permanently sealed the barrier between their realm and the warp and real space, meaning the Eldar could no longer summon the Eldar gods to their aid. This was actually the beginning of the end of the Eldar Empire. See, after 60 million years, the Eldar got bored. They were masters of the galaxy, lived for thousands of years, and when they died, they were able to just reincarnate with their memories intact. With their gods now at arm's length, the Eldar began to fall into depravity to keep themselves entertained. It started small, pleasure cults on Eldar worlds partaking in narcotics and orgies, which sounds like a fucking vibe. However, it got worse and worse whilst becoming more widespread, with the Eldar moving into violent blood orgies, sacrifice, and other less vibey stuff. The issue was that because the Eldar were a psychic race, their emotions echoed loudly in the warp. With so many Eldar railing coke then railing each other, these emotions began to coalesce into a new warp god, the Chaos God Slaanesh. Before shit really hit the fan with Slaanesh though, humanity had begun its rise. We had slowly but surely advanced through the years much in the same way as real life. There was the ancient Egyptian and Greek cultures, the Mona Lisa, and then in the 21st century I'm sure there was like Fortnite and a dumb piece of shit YouTuber called Major Kill. But then things kept going. We mastered space travel, figured out how to travel faster than light by inventing the warp drive, a device that could open a portal to the warp, fly through it, and pop out somewhere else in the galaxy at a micro fraction of the time it would take to do it normally. With this technology, humanity colonized thousands of worlds. We were wildly advanced, with machines and fabricators that could make us anything, as well as highly intelligent AIs to help us. Yes, the Eldar Empire was very mighty and controlled a lot of the galaxy, but not as much as you would think. They didn't breed very quickly and they were content to control their own territory without much ambition for expansion. So whilst I'm sure the humans and Eldar did fight here and there, it wasn't either race's goal or hobby. But just as the Eldar and the human empires were both at their zenith, shit hit the fan. Humanity's robotic servants rose up and started attacking their creators. Shit was fucked. Roombas were crashing into people's ankles, sex robots started blueballing people, you know, real twisted shit. However, through great effort as well as the help of a few alien races humanity was mates with, the robots, the Men of Iron as they were called, were destroyed. However, shit then got even worse. See, the Eldar's empire-spanning blood orgies had destabilized the warp, making interstellar travel super hard, hence cutting mankind's empire off from itself. Then to make matters even worse, the psychic mutation emerged, with a number of humans on every world developing psychic powers. These powers seemed cool at first, with many human worlds celebrating these psychic superheroes. But then it got bad as demons from the realms of chaos within the warp used these psychers, who drew their power from the warp as living portals to invade real space, destroying thousands of human worlds in a demonic blood rush. Many other human worlds simply died from lack of trade, especially ones like mining worlds that relied on off-world imports of food. This period of darkness was the Age of Strife and lasted 5,000 years. 5,000 years of human worlds being cut off and preyed upon by other alien races. 5,000 years of lost technology. It's because of these 5,000 years that humanity went from a let's be friends with aliens to the hyper-racist, fucking genocide the tits off anything that isn't human. Even Earth wasn't spared. Cut off from its empire, Earth, or Terra as it's called in Warhammer, devolved into nuclear civil war, rendering much of the world inhabitable. During mankind's rise and fall, a special human had been born thousands of years before the birth of Christ, the culmination of 1,000 psychic shamans performing ritualistic suicide all at once to combine their soul into a super being. the Emperor of Man was born. Now, he wasn't born with the title the Emperor, that would be a bit hectic, but he was already wise as fuck as a child, and he traveled the world. He acted as a shepherd to humanity, but not always as a ruler. Sometimes he would step in and lead a nation, but once he was satisfied they weren't going to fuck themselves, he would go back to the shadows. See, his unique birth made him a perpetual, an immortal being with immense physical and psychic power. He had shepherded mankind into a golden age of technological enlightenment that lasted thousands of years before the Age of Strife, and the Emperor was content, happy to stay on the sidelines, expanding his knowledge. However, when the Age of Strife did hit and things went sour, he foresaw that humanity would be doomed if he didn't step in. So he said, fuck this shit, and decided that he would become the master of mankind and lord of the galaxy. Fuck yeah. He detected that the Elder Empire was approaching its climax of depravity, which would birth Slaanesh. The psychic shockwave of that birth would blow away the warp storms that prevented interstellar travel, allowing humanity to be once again united. At this point, it was around the 31st millennium. To prepare for this, the Emperor used his dozens of thousands of years of knowledge to create his Custodes and Thunder Warriors, two superhuman breeds of soldiers. The Custodes were handcrafted masterpieces, the Emperor's personal army and bodyguards. The Thunder Warriors were crude, short-lived brutes, but were very powerful in their own right. With these superhumans, the Emperor conquered Earth. However, he knew that the Thunder Warriors would not be able to conquer the galaxy for him. They died young and were kinda retarded. Hence he got his Custodes to cull the Thunder Warriors in order to replace them with the much more marketable and long-lived Space Marines. See, the Emperor foresaw many calamities to come. The rise of Chaos, which was the demonic forces that had been biding their time since the War in Heaven, the rise of the Beast, which was a Giga-Orc capable of conquering the galaxy, and other nasty shit such as the Necron's awakening and the arrival of the Tyranids. So he created 20 demigod generals in secret using his own genius, the souls of minor warp gods, and his own DNA. They were his sons, his Primarchs, and from their DNA, he created the Space Marines as the sons of the Primarchs. However, due to some warp spaghetti and the intervention of the Chaos Gods, the four Lords of Hell, the Primarchs were stolen from the Emperor's laboratories and scattered throughout the galaxy. The Emperor was like, fuck! And he launched his legendary Great Crusade with the aid of Mars, Terra's neighbor, who had wildly advanced technological and manufacturing capabilities, two things required when you need to conquer a galaxy. How did the Emperor get Mars to be his personal factory, I hear you ask? Well, during the medieval ages, he beat up a Catan that was on Earth, put it in a coma and locked it under Mars. Its essence and influence then advanced the Martians' people's technological intellect. The Emperor then exploited their religious beliefs into tricking them that he was their god and messiah, because of course he did. The Great Crusade was epic. Hundreds of thousands of Space Marines and countless billions of army and navy personnel conquering, colonizing, liberating or integrating various worlds, rapidly expanding the Imperium of Man. As each world was brought into the fold, either through force or diplomacy, the Imperium swelled. One by one, the Primarchs were found and given command of their own legions, the same legions that were created using their own DNA. Sanguinius, the Angel, was given his Blood Angels. Rogel Dawn, the stubborn asshole, was given his Imperial Fists. Horus, the first Primarch to be found and the Emperor's favoured son, was given his Lunar Wolves. As the Primarchs were found, the pace of the Crusade accelerated, as now mankind had these demigod superhuman commanders leading the charge. But what about the Elder? Why didn't they stop humanity's conquest? Well, when Slaanesh was finally born, her birth instantly killed 99% of the Elder and destroyed most of their worlds. Most Elder were too insane and depraved by that point to understand the danger of their indulgent actions. The only survivors were the Dark Elder, who were living in the Webway, an artificial network of psychic tunnels that cut through the warp and was shielded from the warp, the Exodite Elder, who foresaw the calamity and left beforehand, and then the Craft Worlds, living continent-sized ships that were able to avoid the decline of their race due to their nomadic nature, hence were able to fly away from the epicenter of Slaanesh's birth. But yeah, the Elder were in no position to challenge humanity's rise. Despite mankind and the Emperor's dominion, the Biggie knew humanity would never be safe until Chaos was beaten. See, not many people knew about Chaos, and the Emperor didn't want people to know, as knowing about it gave it strength. Hence, the Emperor had created a secular godless Imperium, the idea being to drain the Chaos Gods of strength as everyone became atheist and didn't believe in anything. The power of belief is a big theme in Warhammer. But to beat chaos, the Emperor had to remove humanity's reliance on the warp. Most notably, he had to remove warp travel. See, mankind was slowly evolving to become a psychic race, like the Elder, and the Emperor didn't want the birth of Slaanesh 2, Electric Boogaloo, so he began creating his secret webway project, the goal being to break into the Elder webway and then convert sections of it for human use. Then humanity could have massive cities full of psykers that were kept away from the warp and chaos, as well as use the human webway for risk-free travel. If it wasn't obvious, warp travel, i.e. cutting through hell to travel, possesses a lot of risks to someone's lifespan. Chaos did not want humanity to free itself of its influence. If the webway project was completed, then Chaos would suffer greatly as its main food source would be denied to it. Hence it reared its ugly head and decided it was time to act. The time for waiting was over. Chaos exploited the weakness, insecurities and ego of the Primarchs Horus and Lorgar in order to turn them to their cause, filling their heads with half-truths and twisted visions of the future. From here, Horus was able to convince half of his Primarch brothers to join him in rebellion against the Emperor. Thus the Horus heresy began. It started horribly for the Emperor's forces. 3 of his Space Marine legions and their Primarchs were lured into a trap and massacred, whilst the rest of his forces were scattered. See, Horus had been named War Master before his betrayal, so he was able to command the Imperium's armies whilst the Emperor worked on the Webway project. As such, Horus was able to direct most weapons and ammo to his traitor legions, whilst he then sent the more powerful Loyalist legions to the far edges of the galaxy, keeping them out of the way. The heresy was a time of titanic battles, heroic last stands and acts of defiance, brother against brother, father against son. It culminated with Horus and his army sieging Terra itself. The siege ended with Horus killing Sanguinius and then the Emperor killing Horus in turn, but not before suffering mortal wounds. With Horus's death, the traitor forces were broken and driven back, eventually regrouping in the Eye of Terror, which was the epicenter of Slaanesh's birth, a hellish realm that the Loyalists were unable to penetrate. The Emperor was placed on the Golden Throne, an extremely advanced device that both kept him alive and killed him in equal measure. His soul lived on, but his body withered. See, the heresy had done obscene damage to the Imperium. The Webway project had been destroyed, multiple Primarchs had been killed, with most of the traitor Primarchs ascending to become Demon Lords. The Golden Throne allowed the Emperor to guide the Astronomicon, a beacon of light that allowed the Imperium to navigate the warp, whilst also keeping the Webway Gate under Terra shut, as since it was destroyed, it had become flooded with demons. Hence the Emperor has sat on the throne for over 10,000 years, literally holding his Imperium together as his body withers and he endures unimaginable agony. The Imperium survived the Horus heresy, but without the Emperor's guidance, it began a slow and steady decline over the next 10 millennium. The Emperor's secular atheist policies were abandoned in favor of the imperial cult, a mandatory religion that declared the Emperor as a god. Alien races that had been pushed to the brink of extinction, like the Orcs, returned in great number and began threatening the Imperium. Eldar raiders also joined in on the fun, whilst the newly established Chaos faction was an ever-present threat. Other new threats emerged, like the rapidly advancing Tau Empire or the arrival of the Tyranids, a parasitic hive mind species from another galaxy. On top of that, the Necrons began awakening as it had been 60 million years, with the Silent King himself returning to the galaxy after traveling the cosmos. To make matters even more worse, Chaos had finally marshaled enough strength to deal a crippling blow to the Imperium at the end of the 41st millennium, destroying their fortress world of Cadia, which allowed the Eye of Terror to expand and cut the galaxy in half, with one half of the Imperium now no longer being able to warp travel, as well as there being no more Astronomicon on that side. Demons invaded 1,000 worlds as the death scream of the Imperium began to sound. All was lost. Until it fucking wasn't. Through a serious effort of both the Imperium and the Eldar, Rabute Guilliman, the Avenging Sun, the Lord of Ultramar, and one of the greatest Primarchs to ever live, was revived from his near-death stasis. With his resurrection came the unveiling of the Primaris Marines and the start of the Indomitus Crusade, mankind's revenge against all its foes. Guilliman smashed Chaos aside, reclaiming many Imperial worlds and pulling the Imperium back from the brink. He defeated his demon brothers Magnus and Mortarion in the process, thus bringing us into the modern-day setting. Guilliman is trying to unfuck the galaxy, Chaos, led by Abaddon the Despoiler, is trying to fuck the galaxy, the Silent King is attempting to cut off the warp from the galaxy, which would fuck everyone who wasn't a Necron, the Tyranids are trying to eat everyone's ass, the Eldar are trying to awaken their god of death to take on Slaanesh, the Orcs are just having a great time with all the war and shit going on, the Tau are just trying to exist in a galaxy that fucking hates them. In the grim darkness of the 42nd millennium, there is only war. And that is more or less a rundown of the entire lore of Warhammer 40k. Obviously, there is a shitload of important side quests and side lore that I haven't included because, you know, like 24-hour video if I did, but this should bring even the most functional non-virgin members of society up to speed. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up a Major Mini, wide range of high quality professionally printed minis that ship worldwide. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more fucking entire lore and shit content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
The universe of Warhammer 40k is a richly woven tapestry made up of thousands of threads, all forming the sprawling designs that form the robust lore base for this franchise. The largest parts of those patterns are the many factions that inhabit this setting, each representing a race or grouping of peoples with years of established lore that has been written, lost, changed, reworked, and reimagined. As such, it can be easy to get lost in this literal galaxy of cultures, even for those who have been immersed in this universe for years. So, let us offer to guide you on a brief tour of the people who make the 40k universe alive. These are the factions of 40k. It would be impossible to start a list like this with anyone other than the Imperium of Man. Humanity in the 42nd millennium is a diverse, sprawling mass of people, trillions and trillions of citizens, turning the massive grinding wheels of an uncaring, unkind society broken into billions of fiefs, baronies, concords, and autocracies, and at the very top, a small group of deeply corrupt individuals propping up the barely living corpse of a god who dared to dream of a galaxy ruled by Terra. Like any fascist dictatorship, the Imperium controls its citizens through the threat of force and propaganda, and everything revolves around the ever-present struggle for survival. Entire planets and systems are given over to specific production uses, and every single person is meant to live and die for the God Emperor. They are pressed into service running factories, churning out weapons and ammunition. They are whipped into growing food for entire sectors of blasted battlefields that can no longer sustain life, and of course, they are conscripted in their billions to feed into the ever-burning furnace of war. This is life as a human in the 42nd millennium. It wasn't always like this, of course. Humanity went through its golden age where we developed technology so fantastical it bordered on magic and spread to every corner of the galaxy. And then in our hubris, we fell. Our civilization fractured into isolated pockets that would war amongst each other for millennia. It was in this age of strife that the Emperor appeared, a gleaming golden god possessing incredible psychic powers and the knowledge of technology long lost to us. He rose up and conquered Terra using genetically engineered soldiers before setting his sights on the stars. The next part is important, but probably best left for another video, so here's the broad strokes. Knowing the dangerous power of chaos, the Emperor decided to fight back with his genetically engineered children, the Primarchs. These were promptly stolen by the Chaos Gods and scattered across the universe, but not before the Emperor could use their genetic material to design a new force of super soldiers, the Space Marines. He took these Marines on a whirlwind tour of the galaxy, linking up with those pockets of humanity left behind during the Age of Strife, and also finding his lost sons along the way. Unfortunately, as many of us know, family can be complicated, and inside a few short centuries of warfare, half of them turned on the Emperor and his new Imperium. These rebellions never tend to work out though, and the sons who sided with War Master Horus, the Emperor's favorite son who had fallen to the whispered promises of chaos, were either killed or chased into hiding with their legions of Space Marines. But in the fighting, the Emperor was mortally wounded and was bound in a life-saving device known as the Golden Throne, kept alive but only just, his psychic might powering a beacon that allows humanity to travel across the galaxy using the warp as a shortcut to this day. It was during the next 10,000 years that the Imperium became what it is now, with many different forces and systems being created to prop up failing or stagnating ones. We have the Space Marines, of course. These super soldiers created by the Emperor survive to this day, fighting as the sharpest point of humanity's spear against the darkness. Then there's the Imperial Guard or Astra Militarum, the grand armies of the Imperium that are made of regular humans acting as a bulwark against the many dangers that constantly threaten to destroy us. The Mechanicum of Mars, secretive druids who control all technology in the Imperium and constantly search for what was lost during the Age of Strife. They are jealous and superstitious, often only able to build or repair objects through memorized rituals. And the Inquisition, the Watchers who watch the Watchmen. The Inquisition are spies and investigators, duty-bound to hunt down the most insidious threats to humanity, even from inside the very organizations that hold us up. The alien, the mutant, and the heretic are the targets of this shadowy organization. There are, of course, many more than we have time to go over here, but it's important to be clear that the Imperium of the 42nd millennium is a faction constantly at war with itself, spread so thin across the stars that there could be no hope of running a functioning society, even with fear. Sitting parallel to reality lies the nightmare realm of the warp, a writhing, bubbling soup made primarily of the thoughts and emotions of sentient creatures from the beginning of time. In those uncounted eons, terrifying predators have slowly gained form and sentience, some more powerful than others, but each representing an aspect of reality like a dark mirror. In the ancient days of the universe, the warp was known as the Sea of Souls and was relatively calm. People like the mysterious Old Ones and the ancient Eldari were able to tap into the sea and use its power to work miracles. But in the course of time, and with the things that sentient creatures do, such as love and hate and make war especially, those predators in the warp grew fat and strong, and so did the gods of chaos take form. Horn the blood god, born of hate and rage, Nurgle, bearer of plagues, born of despair and the fear of death, Tzeentch the Changebringer, born of ambition and the desire for change, and finally much later, Slaanesh, the prince of pleasure and excess, born of greed and lust. These creatures immediately began spinning their webs across reality, seducing mortals and searching for ways to break in and, well, cause chaos. In the history of Warhammer 40k, the Chaos Gods are most responsible for completely ruining the plans of the Emperor, Terra's Golden Protector. They turned several of his Primarch sons, and in doing so, gained almost 9 full legions of Space Marines to command. And it's through these forces and the billions of cultists seeded across human worlds that the galaxy primarily knows chaos. It would not be unfair to think that if humanity were to be completely destroyed, then chaos itself would be dealt a death blow from which it might never recover, and the Sea of Souls would be rendered safe once again. Old, wise, cunning, and self-righteous, the Eldari of the Asuryani are the last survivors of a broken race who once controlled the galaxy. The Eldari were one of the first peoples created by the mysterious Old Ones at the dawn of time, and were clearly the favorites. The Old Ones shared much of their wisdom with the ancient Eldari, and when they disappeared at the end of the War in Heaven, their elf-like children inherited their most impressive creation, the Webway. The ability to travel across the galaxy quickly without having to pass through the Chaos Realm of the Warp gave the Eldari a huge advantage over the other races, even if the Warp at that time was not as dangerous as it is in the 42nd millennium. Using the Webway, the Eldari flourished and quickly came to rule the galaxy. It wasn't long afterwards that things started getting worse. The Eldari are a race that experiences things to a greater extreme than most other creatures. They feel things more keenly, more intensely, and most of their kind have some level of psychic power. Unchecked, this led the Eldari civilization to devolve into hedonism on a scale we humans couldn't possibly imagine. The Asuryani are descended from the Eldari, who saw the warning signs of their collapsing empire and decided to flee into deep space aboard continent-sized ships called craft worlds. Here, they rode out the dying gasps of their old society and formed a new one based on rigid paths designed to guide the powerful minds of their people so as to avoid the horrors that had nearly destroyed them all. Led by powerful psychers, ancient war leaders, and constructs powered by their honored dead, the Asuryani fight to right the wrongs of their civilization, which gave birth to a whole new god of chaos, and to perhaps gain the slim chance of a future for their dwindling kind. The Drakari are the last remnants of the old Eldari Empire, living uninhibited and reveling in the excess of lived experiences. That part definitely sounds like the functional opposite of their Craftworld cousins, but it's the content of those experiences that takes this comparison away from Dark Mirror and firmly into something else. When the old Eldari Empire began to fracture, it was at the very height of its depravity. Cannibalism, substance abuse, assault, murder, the Eldari had become a race lost in the swirling tempest of their own emotions, and had embraced cruelty as an art form. This is what led to the fall, the explosive punctuation of all the psychic power put out by the uninhibited Eldari gave birth to the Chaos God Slaanesh, a crescendo of depravity that consumed the heart of their galaxy-spanning empire in the space of a single heartbeat, with a gaping wound in reality called the Eye of Terror to stand as its grave marker. Those highly placed in the old society have fled into the webway to survive, too late to join the craft worlds, but just quick enough to avoid the full consequences of their misdeeds. Here, in a small pocket of the webway, under the glow of several stolen stars, they took residence in the city of Kamara, the most important webway port ever built by the Eldari Empire. They hid from Slaanesh and began making forays into real space, fetching slaves and searching for methods to avoid the grasp of She Who Thirsts. Instead of changing their ways, the Drakari maintained their sadistic lifestyle, eventually figuring out how to use the pain and suffering of other creatures to extend their lives, and they truly delight in it. The cabals that rule Kamara are at constant odds with each other, sniping and jabbing, looking for any way to gain control, be it by blackmail, intrigue, or outright assassination. The old nobility of the Eldari Empire became homunculi, mad scientists who experiment even on their own flesh for a variety of reasons, pleasure being one of them. And all the while, the witch covens fight in the grand arenas with slaves and monsters, gaining longevity through the thrill of extreme experiences and the love of bloodshed. Out of the black nothingness between galaxies drifted the hive fleets of the Tyranids in the late 41st millennium. Taking the other races by surprise, these creatures stripped whole worlds of life before moving on to new ones, like a horde of terrifying alien locusts. But it quickly became apparent that the Tyranids were not mindless beasts, they were guided by a massively oppressive intelligence which formed complex plans and invasion routes and could even blot out the pervasive touch of the warp itself. The bioforms of the Tyranids are many and change constantly in response to new threats, ensuring that any method of beating them is quickly erased. Each group of these monsters are also guided by a powerful synapse creature, which acts as a focus for the hive mind and a useful way to guide the swarm across trillions of battlefields at the same time. The real terror of this menace is that it comes from outside our galaxy, implying that these creatures have already devoured at least one other, but also that the overwhelming forces of hive fleets we've faced already could represent only a fraction of their number. A scout force looking for fresh biomass the same way gene stealers guide their parent swarms. Across the many threats to life in 40K, it can be difficult to say which faction represents the most pressing danger, but in the face of the Tyranids, the answer becomes very clear. If the peoples of the galaxy can't learn to work together, the Great Devourer will have the ultimate victory. The next title is Orcs. The warlike orcs are easily another one of these potentially galaxy-destroying threats, or they would be if they ever united. The average orc boy is a large, meaty slab of muscle with green skin and large tusks. Starting out, they normally stand at least a head taller than even the tallest human, but continually grow over the course of their lives according to their importance in their warband. So, while orcs tend to lead short, violent lives, those that can survive longer than a couple of battles tend to grow to truly monstrous sizes, with stories from the Great Crusade reporting powerful orc war bosses the size of multi-story buildings. buildings. The orcs and their subspecies, like Gretchen, snotlings, and squigs, are a species of sentient or nearly sentient fungi, multiplying by way of spores that disperse when an orc dies. This method of reproduction not only makes a greenskin infestation hard to stamp out, but also explains why they easily outnumber every other race in the galaxy. And those numbers come into play quite a bit, with gatherings of orcs creating a low-level psychic field that only their shamans and weird boys can seem to take advantage of. For an orc, powerful belief literally makes things happen, leading to impossible machinery and surgeries to actually work when used or done to an orc. Adding to that, individual orcs are some of the hardest creatures to kill in existence, able to shrug off shockingly extreme injuries to keep fighting, which is their favorite pastime. As we mentioned earlier, orc society is balanced through pure violence. The more successful an individual orc is, the bigger they grow, the more violence they can carry out, and on until someone larger comes along and stops the train. An orc is constantly fending off challenges to their authority, but once they get truly massive, they basically can't be stopped. This also holds true on the large scale, with warbands and clans forming behind large successful bosses, eventually leading to a Waaagh, the orc version of a crusade, which spreads a wave of peak orc violence across whole sectors of space in search of a good scrap. The orc gods are similarly vicious, with Gork being cunning and brutal, while Mork is brutal yet cunning. We're sure this won't surprise you at this point, but the orcs frequently fight over which god is best, while also mistaking them for each other. Where the orcs came from, no one knows. Orc legend says that they were created by a lost subspecies called the Brain Boys, who engineered them to be the meanest and greenest, but a greater likelihood would be that they were created by the Old Ones as either a hardy construction force or as a last-ditch effort to win the war in heaven against the Necrons and their Catan patrons. But their constant need to fight is actually why they're not likely to ever become a larger threat than the Tyranids, Necrons, or the Forces of Chaos. Orcs love fighting so much that they're constantly fighting each other, smashing themselves into many smaller empires, all fighting themselves and anything else that happens to get within Crumpin distance. We have very little recorded lore from the beginning of our galaxy's history, but what we do know for sure is that it was dominated largely by two of the very first sentient races, the immortal, all-powerful Old Ones and the Necrontyr. Living in some of the most hostile areas of space, the Necrontyr led very short, painful lives, plagued by heavy radiation and solar winds. Every new system they spread to seemed to have the same problems. It was said that Necrontyr cities were built to be mausoleums, with larger and more grand homes being built for the dead than there were for the living. With this sort of grim life comes two things: strife and bitterness. Seeking to end the pain, the Necrontyr asked the Old Ones for help and were denied. The two races had been feuding for territory since they had encountered one another, and it had led to what the Necrontyr felt was an unfair advantage for the seemingly godlike Old Ones. This is how the war in heaven began, and almost immediately, the Old Ones had the upper hand. They were masters of not only technology like the webway, which allowed them to quickly and safely travel the galaxy, but they had access to psychic powers fueled by the warp. Within a few short centuries of fighting, the Necrontyr had been pushed back to their radiation-blasted homeworlds and forgotten. It was in this despair and anger that the Catan found them. Beings who fed on the very stars themselves, these parasitic creatures had power and knowledge of advanced technology that could even the playing field and allow the Necrontyr to take their revenge on the Old Ones. All they had to do was transfer themselves from their weak, fleshy bodies and into ones made of glorious living metal. But this was a trick, played on them by the Catan known as the Deceiver. As soon as the rites of biotransference began, it was clear they had been played, as the Necrontyr traded their souls for the chance to live forever, and the Catan absorbed the cast-off life essence to grow much stronger. Only the strongest were even able to keep their minds intact, and even then, some were already losing their sense of individuality. The Catan were now too strong to even consider rebelling against, and so the Necrontyr instead decided to finish the Old Ones and bide their time. They had become the Necrons. The fighting was brutal and swift. With their new bodies and the technology granted by the Catan, the Necrons swept the old ones aside, reaching even their strongholds inside the webway. Stars were collapsed and whole systems razed before the war in heaven was won for the Necrons. And it's here that they chose to turn on the Catan, tearing them apart while the Star Gods were distracted with the recent victory. Once this was done, the Necrons saw that the creations of the Old Ones, the Eldari and the Orcs, among many others, were growing more numerous and would one day beat them with sheer numbers, and so they chose to retreat deep under the surface of their worlds and sleep the millennia away. And the galaxy they came back to in the 41st millennia was one of turmoil and strife, with the creations of the Old Ones vying for control while monsters from the Sea of Souls threatened to destroy reality itself. Sleep could no longer be justified. The Necron would have to clean up this mess once and for all. From the oldest race to the youngest, the Tau burst onto the galactic scene in early M41. This young race of territorial aliens have become known for their bold use of advanced technology and the speed at which they adapt to new situations. Originally discovered by an Imperial survey team in the 35th millennium, the Tau were simple hunter-gatherers who hadn't yet formed societies. Soon after, a warp storm cut off their planet from further Imperial meddling, and by the time it had cleared, over 6,000 years later, the Tau had advanced to a fully interplanetary species capable of challenging the Imperium on the battlefield. The Tau are people marked by distinct biological differences according to the conditions they evolved in. During the early part of their history, Tau from the plains were particularly aggressive, while the Tau from the mountains evolved slender bodies, hollow bones, and flaps of skin so they could glide. This rapid change in physical attributes led to large-scale war during their Black Powder era, a time they called the Montau. It was then that the first Ethereals appeared. The Ethereals had an uncanny ability to calm those around them, a quiet authority that seemed to compel other Tau to listen and overcome their differences. Imperial scientists suspect this effect is a low-level psychic field or perhaps a trick using pheromones, but whatever the source of this ability, the Ethereals not only stopped the wars from ravaging Tau society, but quickly reordered it into what we see today, a rigid caste-based civilization where each member knows their place and works towards the greater good. Once unified, the Tau began to rapidly expand through their local star system and then beyond. Even though they didn't have the ability to travel faster than light or through the warp, they encountered several alien species during their first expansion, absorbing most of them into their empire, similarly to how colonization was achieved on Terra in the 20th century. Most new species were seemingly happy to join the empire, but not everyone. The Orcs were the most notable exception, and it was in their fighting with the Greenskins that the Tau honed their skills in warfare. Then came the first fights with the behemoth that is the Imperium of Man. Fighting during the Damocles Crusade showed the Tau that they were hopelessly outmatched by the gargantuan scale of the Imperium, but they were able to fight them on the small scale, and so when they were saved from the full might of the Imperial war machine by the Tyranid invasion on Macra, the Tau took advantage of the lull in fighting to expand again. And this has largely been the way the Tau have survived through the last millennium or so. They are a very adaptable people and are able to spot opportunities at a moment's notice. It also doesn't hurt that the Imperium keeps getting into huge fights with other galactic threats, so they can never really seem to pay attention to the little blue aliens. Deep in the galactic core dwell the Leagues of Votan, the cloned descendants of miners, explorers, and settlers sent out on generation ships from the pre-Imperial Terra. Hundreds of fleets dove into the dense gravity of the core, trusting their ancestor AI cores that they called the Votan. It was these advanced AI that guided the survivors in the construction of holds for them to live, clone skeins for them to grow resistant to heavy gravity and the mutating powers of chaos, and the colossal particle excavators that allowed the kindred to dismantle still-forming stars for rare elements that made them fantastically wealthy. The reliance on cloning eventually led to a diminished size, dwarfing the survivors over the generations into squat but hardy people who spent most of their time amongst themselves. And though they still acknowledge their ancient link to Terra, these people want nothing to do with the superstitious Imperium, choosing instead to gather in groups of kindred called Leagues, around the millennia's old AI constructs that they now take their name from. That being said, the wealth gained by being one of the very few races hardy enough to withstand the conditions in the galactic core has to go somewhere, and so the Leagues of Votan quite frequently end up bartering with other civilizations, and some Kindred have even formed prospector fleets that search the wider galaxy for similarly rich areas to exploit. These tough space dwarves have built a culture around the symbiotic relationship with their environment and their technology, which the Imperium technophobic leadership would seek to destroy or claim for themselves if they knew, and of course the Kindred are very careful not to let them. If the Imperium ever found out that the Leagues of Votan were actually long-lost human settlers instead of mysterious squat Xenos, they would surely attempt to lay claim to their entire civilization. For that reason, the Kindred are much more happy to live near and work with other Xeno species like the Tau and the Eldari. Both the newest and one of the oldest factions in 40k, these squats might be different from what some of us Longbeards remember, but it's good to have them back on the table all the same. The universe of Warhammer 40k is wide and diverse with a colorful array of players on its stage. So much rich story, in fact, that it feels almost like a disservice to cover them all so briefly here. There is, however, more than enough Legendarium to do deeper dives into not just individual factions, but the distinct armies and sub-factions that make them up. So, if you have a particular need to hear about any of these colorful players in the grimmest of dark futures, do let us know in the comments below. And of course, if this is your first time seeing our videos, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like so that you never find yourself without more lore.
Ay, demasiadas comisiones. No le dejé el guante.
Las escuelas son los lugares donde los padres dejan a sus hijos con la confianza de que estos se desarrollen de forma segura. Sin embargo, en el tejido de nuestra historia latinoamericana se entrelazan episodios de alegría, lucha y también de inmenso dolor. Hoy nos centramos en uno de los capítulos más oscuros y desgarradores de Latinoamérica, las tragedias sucedidas en el lugar que en teoría deberían ser las ubicaciones más seguras.
Un enfrentamiento y persecución entre fuerzas federales e integrantes de la delincuencia organizada convirtió a esta zona en todo un campo de batalla. El saldo fue de 2 sicarios cuyos cuerpos fueron encontrados en el interior del campus del TEC de Monterrey.
En su momento se dijo que los muchachos eran sicarios y que iban armados hasta los dientes.
La noche del 19 de marzo de 2010, el prestigioso campus del Tecnológico de Monterrey, un lugar de excelencia académica y desarrollo, se convirtió en el escenario de un horror inimaginable. La tranquilidad habitual fue abruptamente destrozada por un acto de violencia que dejaría una cicatriz profunda en la comunidad. Jorge Antonio Mercado Alonso y Javier Francisco Arredondo Verdugo, 2 estudiantes de posgrado, estaban en el lugar equivocado en el momento equivocado. La oscuridad de la noche fue rasgada por el sonido de disparos, mientras que las fuerzas del orden se enfrentaban a lo que creían era un grupo de criminales. En la confusión y el caos, Jorge y Javier fueron alcanzados por las balas, cayendo al suelo del campus que una vez fue su refugio.
La balacera entre sicarios y militares deja como saldo 2 personas muertas.
Los estudiantes no eran criminales, ni siquiera estaban involucrados en alguna actividad ilícita. Eran jóvenes brillantes con sueños y esperanzas, dedicados a su educación y a la construcción de un futuro mejor. Sin embargo, esa noche sus vidas fueron cruelmente sesgadas por el plomo y la ignorancia. La versión oficial inicial pintaba un cuadro de enfrentamiento entre las fuerzas del orden y supuestos delincuentes. Esto era una buena noticia para el gobierno, que había declarado la recién guerra contra el narco. Los cuerpos de Jorge y Javier fueron manipulados, colocándoles armas y cartuchos para justificar su muerte como parte de un combate legítimo. Los medios de comunicación replicaron esta narrativa, reforzando la mentira de que 2 criminales habían sido abatidos en el campus del Tecnológico de Monterrey, pero la verdad no podía ser sepultada tan fácilmente. Las cámaras de seguridad del campus, que inicialmente fueron ignoradas, mostraron la realidad. Las grabaciones revelaban a los estudiantes desarmados tratando de escapar del peligro, solo para ser derribados y posteriormente alterados en la escena del crimen. La brutalidad de estas imágenes era innegable y pintaba una historia completamente diferente. La indignación y el dolor de la comunidad universitaria y de las familias de Jorge y Javier crecieron. exigiendo justicia y transparencia. Aquí es que la versión oficial se desmoronaba bajo el peso de la evidencia y la verdad comenzó a emerger, mostrando la negligencia y la malicia detrás de la tragedia. El Tecnológico de Monterrey, un aparente símbolo de esperanza y progreso, se vio obligado a confrontar la realidad de la violencia que había sido perpetrada en sus muros. Las autoridades universitarias habían sido inicialmente presionadas para aceptar la versión oficial, pero afortunadamente comenzarían a exigir justicia para sus estudiantes caídos. La presión pública y la persistencia de las familias llevaron a una reexaminación del caso. Así, el 24 de marzo del 2010, la Comisión Nacional de los Derechos Humanos emitió una recomendación al ejército y a las autoridades civiles, subrayando la manipulación de la escena del crimen y la falsificación de las pruebas. Las investigaciones independientes y los testimonios reforzaron la necesidad de una revisión completa del caso. Con el tiempo, el Estado mexicano se vio obligado a reconocer la verdad. El asesinato de Jorge Mercado y Javier Arredondo en el Tecnológico de Monterrey se convirtió en un sombrío recordatorio de la violencia que puede infiltrarse en los lugares más inesperados. La manipulación y la injusticia que rodearon sus muertes fueron desenmascaradas, pero el dolor y la pérdida permanecieron. Sin lugar a dudas, el legado de Jorge Javier es una valentía y búsqueda de justicia. Sus nombres ahora no solo representan el horror de aquella noche, sino también la resistencia de una comunidad que se niega a olvidar y que lucha por un futuro donde tales tragedias no se repitan. La primera hora del 13 de noviembre de 1971 fue inusitadamente violenta en el Instituto Técnico de Agricultura. Durante aproximadamente una hora se vivió una actividad de terror que derivó en un resultado sangriento y mortal. Esa hora bastaría para partir la historia del citado centro de estudio en un antes y un después de este acontecimiento. El estudiante Basilio Martínez Ávila, de 21 años, se armó con un machete y atacó a los estudiantes que dormían en su habitación. Le quitó la vida al estudiante Vinicio Guzmán, de 17 años, a machetazos en la cara y el cuerpo, así como al guardia de seguridad que intentó detenerlo, Francisco Aldana García, de 55 años. También hirió a 15 personas, entre ellas un policía que intentó desarmarlo. Al cabo de media hora fue finalmente dominado por los demás estudiantes y enviado a un hospital para un examen médico. Edwin Rojas, un sobreviviente del ataque, escribió un libro llamado El Relámpago de Medianoche, donde relata de primera mano los acontecimientos provocados por Basilio, quien, en un estado esquizofrénico, desató un ataque a medianoche con un machete afilado que había arrebatado la vida a 2 personas. Según las investigaciones de algunos, se atribuye sus acciones a posibles causas de la tragedia del desprecio, racismo y discriminación existentes en la época hacia estudiantes indígenas y afroamericanos, siendo que él era uno de esos casos. Esa noche, a las 7, se exhibió una película sobre la historia del esclavismo en los Estados Unidos, considerándose que esa fue la gota que derramó el vaso, pues Basilio, después de verla, dijo que esa noche correría sangre. En las sombras de la historia argentina, una noche de diciembre de 1971 quedó marcada por la violencia y el terror en el ámbito estudiantil. El 6 de diciembre, la Facultad de Arquitectura de la Universidad Nacional del Mar de Plata se convirtió en el escenario de un acto brutal que cambió para siempre la vida de muchos y dejó una huella imborrable en la memoria colectiva del país. En aquel día fatídico, Silvia Fieler, una joven estudiante de 18 años, asistía a una asamblea estudiantil en la universidad. La reunión, convocada para discutir la reforma universitaria, se tornó en un campo de batalla cuando un grupo de extrema derecha, conocido como Concentración Nacional Universitaria, irrumpió violentamente en el lugar. Armados y decididos a imponer su ideología por la fuerza, los miembros de la Concentración Nacional Universitaria comenzaron a agredir a los estudiantes presentes. Silvia, quien se encontraba entre la multitud, fue víctima de un ataque salvaje. En medio del caos recibió un disparo que le quitó la vida, convirtiéndose en mártir de una lucha que buscaba silenciar las voces jóvenes que clamaban por un cambio. La brutalidad de su asesinato no solo sacudió a la comunidad universitaria, sino que también resonó en toda Argentina, exponiendo la creciente violencia política y la represión que se cernía sobre el país. La mañana del 28 de septiembre de 2004, el Colegio Las Malvinas, ubicado en Carmen de Patagones, Argentina, se convirtió en el escenario de una tragedia inimaginable que conmocionó al país. Lo que debería haber sido un día más de clase se transformó en un episodio de terror y dolor que dejó una mancha imborrable en la comunidad.
Solo dolor. Carmen de Patagones no sale del estupor generado por la que protagonizó un joven de apenas 15 años, Rafael Junior Solís, disparó contra sus compañeros de curso y asesinó a 3 de ellos e hirió a otros 5.
A las 7:30 de la mañana, Rafael Solich, un estudiante de 15 años, ingresó al aula del primero A del turno de la mañana, armado con una herramienta de fuego Browning de 9 milímetros que había tomado del armero de su padre. Rafael diría:
"Hoy será un gran día",
comenzando a disparar indiscriminadamente contra sus compañeros. La escena fue de caos y desesperación, mientras los estudiantes intentaban escapar del aula y ponerse a salvo. En cuestión de minutos, 3 jóvenes perdieron la vida: Evangelina Miranda, de 15 años, María Emilia Elías, de 16, y Federico Ponce, de también 15 años. Otros 5 estudiantes resultaron gravemente heridos. El horror y la incredulidad se apoderaron de la escuela y la comunidad, mientras padres y autoridades llegaban al lugar intentando comprender la magnitud de la tragedia.
Las banderas a media asta son el fiel reflejo de la tragedia que se ha vivido hace muy pocas horas en este mismo lugar. Escuela número 2, Islas Malvinas de Carmen de Patagones. El hecho enluta y consterna no solo a la ciudad, sino a todo el país. Y el izamiento de la bandera en este lugar fue lo último que se desarrolló normalmente en este colegio.
La masacre escolar de Carmen de Patagones se convirtió en un símbolo de la vulnerabilidad de los espacios que se consideran seguros y de la urgencia de abordar los problemas de la violencia juvenil y el acceso a las armas. Las investigaciones revelaron que Rafael había sufrido bullying y se encontraba en un estado de aislamiento emocional, factores que pudieron haber provocado su trágica decisión.
Habitualmente Rafael recibía las burlas de sus compañeros, quienes le decían negro, y él respondía haciendo un gesto con su mano, como empuñando un arma, y decía pum pum, te maté. Esa amenaza casi diaria en esta escuela media número 2 Islas Malvinas, hoy la llevó a la realidad y protagonizó una verdadera masacre.
La comunidad de Carmen de Patagones, una pequeña y tranquila ciudad, quedó profundamente afectada por el suceso. Se realizaron vigías y marchas en memoria de las víctimas, y se debatió intensamente sobre las medidas necesarias para prevenir futuros episodios de violencia en las escuelas. La masacre también puso de manifiesto la necesidad de brindar apoyo psicológico a los estudiantes, y de implementar políticas más estrictas sobre el acceso a armas de fuego. Al iniciarse la causa judicial, Rafael fue confinado a un centro de internación para jóvenes delincuentes en el partido de Ensenada. Luego de ser declarado inimputable, Alicia Ramallo, la jueza que llevó el caso, se hizo cargo de su tutela y lo internó en un centro psiquiátrico juvenil en la localidad de San Miguel. Su padre, Rafael Solich, fue condenado a 45 días de prisión por negligencia al dejar el arma al alcance del menor. Se cree que esta fue la primera masacre escolar en Latinoamérica. En Brasil, un estudiante de 17 años disparó a 2 compañeras de 15 años, asesinándolas en la escuela Sigma. Luego, al llegar la policía, el agresor amenazó con quitarse la vida. Según el perpetrador, las 2 jóvenes la ridiculizaban públicamente. El 30 de noviembre de 2003, la tranquilidad de la pequeña ciudad de Itaúba, Sao Paulo, fue desgarrada por un acto de violencia indescriptible que dejó una marca indeleble en la comunidad. En una tarde que parecía ser como cualquier otra, el exalumno de la escuela estatal Benedito Ortiz, Edmar Aparecido Freitas, de 18 años, desencadenó una tragedia que sacudiría a todos los habitantes del lugar. Armado con un revólver calibre 38 y cargado con 105 balas, Edmar ingresó al patio de su escuela a las 15 horas. Sin mediar palabra, comenzó a disparar en todas direcciones, sembrando el pánico y el terror entre los aproximadamente 50 estudiantes de secundaria que se encontraban allí. En cuestión de minutos, había disparado 14 veces, hiriendo a 8 personas, entre ellas 6 estudiantes, un profesor y el conserje de la escuela. Finalmente, se quitó la vida. El ataque de Edmar, un joven descrito por todos como tranquilo, educado y sin antecedentes policiales, dejó perplejos a sus excompañeros, profesores y hasta familiares. Edmar había sido un estudiante destacado y querido en la escuela Benedito Ortiz, y su acto violento no parecía tener explicación. El día de la tragedia, Edmar saltó la pared lateral de la escuela de 2.7 metros de altura y comenzó su ataque mortal en el patio, disparando al azar. Después de recargar su arma, continuó disparando dentro del edificio escolar, hiriendo más personas. En un último acto desesperado, se dirigió hacia la oficina de la conserjería y disparó al conserje Antonio Sousa, pero se detuvo al apuntar a su esposa, María do Carmo, cuando ella le suplicó por su vida. Finalmente se quitó la vida. La acción rápida y brutal de Edmar duró poco más de un minuto, pero fue suficiente para sumir a la comunidad en pánico y la incredulidad. Estudiantes y profesores saltaron los muros de la escuela en un intento desesperado por escapar del horror. A pesar de las investigaciones, las motivaciones detrás del crimen siguen siendo un misterio. Edmar no consumía sustancias, no se involucraba en peleas y simplemente no parecía tener motivos para tal acto de violencia. El profesor de Psicología de la Violencia de la Universidad de Sao Paulo, Sergio Codatos, sugirió que el comportamiento de Edmar podría considerarse un estallido impulsado por un historial de humillación o inferioridad, destacando que la escuela es un lugar donde tales problemas suelen desencadenarse. El tirador fue mencionado años después como héroe y modelo a seguir por Wellington Meneses de Oliveira, autor de la Lengo que más adelante se mencionará. La mañana del 27 de junio de 2007, la calma del colegio privado Winston Churchill School en la colonia Guadalupe, Ciudad de México, fue destrozada por un acto de violencia brutal que dejó a toda la comunidad en estado de shock.
Fernando Martínez regresó y entró a la oficina de la directora del preescolar. Pasaron varios minutos. Aunque no fue grabado por las cámaras de seguridad, la Procuraduría Capitalina determinó que este fue el momento de la directora de preescolar, Carla María Jiménez Baños. Fernando Martínez salió con una pistola en la mano izquierda.
A las 8:30, cuando los niños más pequeños llegaban al plantel, Fernando González, un abogado de 50 años, ingresó armado al colegio y sin mediar palabra disparó en el rostro de la directora del preescolar. La noticia del asesinato de la directora se propagó rápidamente, sumiendo en la consternación a los padres de familia, maestros y alumnos. Marcelo Martínez, quien tenía antecedentes de ser una persona agresiva y conflictiva, había sido notificado el día anterior junto con su exesposa de que su hijo ya no sería reinscrito debido a los problemas derivados del conflicto entre ambos. Según testigos, Martínez llegó al colegio como cualquier otro padre de familia. Varias ocasiones pasaba por fuera de la escuela para ver si llegaba la directora. Él entró a la escuela normal y se dirigió a la oficina de la directora, donde esperó a Carla Jiménez. Mientras tanto, estuvo saludando a los padres de familia que se encontraban en el colegio. Estuvo pasando así el tiempo esperando a la directora hasta que llegó un niño que al parecer era su hijo. Su hijo le da un beso y le da un abrazo a su padre. Ambos caminan y desaparecen de la escena. Vuelve a aparecer en la escena y se dirige a la dirección. Pasaron algunos segundos hasta que comenzó lo desagradable. Llegó. Martínez sacó un arma calibre 9 milímetros y le disparó en el rostro, terminando con su vida al instante. La reacción inmediata de los presentes fue de pánico. Al escuchar los disparos y los gritos, padres, alumnos y personal de la escuela buscaron refugio. Algunos